Welcome to the second installment of the Director Dossiers podcast, where each episode we chronologically break down and discuss each movie in a director's filmography. My name is Johnny Cruz.
And I'm Danny Barker, and today we'll be opening the dossier on Paul Thomas Anderson.
If you'd like to see more of these retrospectives, you can like and subscribe on YouTube, and also comment down below who you would like to see us do next. Not sexually. You can also listen to this episode on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Thank you for watching, and thank you to everyone who watched our Stanley Kubrick episode. We hope you enjoy this one too.
All right. The early life of Paul Thomas Anderson. He was born on June 26, 1970 in Studio City, LA. Also, my birthday. His mother...
You were born in 1970?
No. June 26. Same as Derek Jeter.
Oh, so you copied him.
Yeah. I'm just trying to be like other people at this point. His mother, Edwina, was an actress, and his father, Ernie, worked in radio and TV. Paul was the seventh of 9 children.
So his dad was very interesting, Ernie Anderson. So he was a booth announcer at ABC, and he was known as like the voice of ABC. He would be the guy on TV at night, like, now you're watching the Carol Burnett show, like that kind of thing. And he was that was like what he was most known for doing. But he was also in Ohio, Cleveland. It was like a mystery science theater. Remember that? Where people would watch a shitty movie and these puppets would be in the crowd and they'd be like, wait a minute, this doesn't make any sense. He did that, but it was for like bad horror movies on TV, and he went by Goulardi. He had this whole getup, and he'd go, "This movie sucks." I don't know if he said that. But
He was commenting on it and making
he was like doing
commentary.
He was doing, not like DVD. It was on TV.
Oh, okay.
It would be like a live. I don't know if it was live, but it would be it was like a kids thing. He did that in the '60s. But it says he was one of 9 children. Paul Thomas Anderson. His dad already had 5 kids by the time he remarried, and then he had he had 4 kids already, and then he met Paul's mom, and then had another 5 kids, and he was the 7th of 9 kids.
Wow.
And also, so what the story was with Ernie Anderson, I'm just spending so much time on him because he's actually a very interesting guy, and I heard one of the funniest stories I've ever heard from Paul Thomas Anderson talking about his dad. So Anderson's dad was friends with Tim Conway, who is an actor, comedian type guy, and he moved out to Los Angeles to get work, and he ended up being on the Carol Burnett show. I will say Carol Burnett properly at least once during this podcast. And he goes to Ernie and goes, "Hey, there's tons of work out here. You got to come out here." Ernie wasn't a very good actor, and he didn't get any work, but as like a courtesy, he ended up getting a booth announcer job on the Carol Burnett show. Dang it. But they were best friends, and Paul grew up around There was a funny story that Paul told where Tim Conway and his dad were drunk one night, and what they did is it was like when Polaroids first started to come out, and what they did is they took Tim Conway and they wrapped him in toilet paper, and then they took a picture and then pasted the picture on his driver's license, and then went out and drunk drove until they got pulled over, just so when the cop would say, "Oh, license and registration," they would give him the license, and he'd be wearing the toilet paper, and then the cop would look at the license, he'd be like, "What?" Just so they can like make the guy laugh or whatever. And I was like, I guess before drunk driving was illegal.
Oh, he was actually drunk.
Yeah, they were hammered, and he would go out dressed as a mummy, and then they would try to get pulled over.
They would do that today.
Oh, well, I don't know when drunk driving was made illegal, but it might have been after that.
Yeah,
maybe that's what did
it was after it was illegal?
It was no, it might have been after they did that, which makes sense because why would you go out and purposely drunk drive if it wasn't illegal?
Purposely just risk your life for the stupidest bit ever.
Yeah, exactly. Or the best bit ever. Oh my god, they were ahead of their time. If TikTok existed back then.
Yeah, that would be a TikTok challenge. The mummy driving drunk challenge. So growing up, Anderson always borrowed his older brother's 8mm camera to make short movies, until one day his father brought home a video camera.
Yeah, he was always making movies from around the house, and he wasn't doing it as I'm going to be a filmmaker one day. He was just doing it for fun, which I guess if you're entrenched in the life of sort of he sort of grew up around TV, was always in booths with his dad, recording stuff, and then the video camera came, and that wasn't the video camera like a digital one. It still had the videotape, but it was the one where you had the pack that you had to carry and stuff. But the thing about it was that it was much cheaper than shooting on 8mm film, so he can basically shoot however much he wanted. And he said his dad brought that home, and he goes, I saw that and I said, that is mine. Nobody else is going to use that.
Mm-hmm.
And then he ended up, I don't know if it was the same camera, but he ended up shooting the Dirk Diggler story
With that?
I don't know with that particular camera, but on videotape.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Mm-hmm. What time was that about? What year?
Oh, his dad probably brought
How
home
old
that
was
video
he?
camera like around 81, 82, early 80s. He was like 10, 12.
Okay. So he
and
got
then
into
Dirk
it
Diggler, he
fairly
was
early.
17, so that was like 87, 88.
Mm-hmm. So he was already putting things together pretty early.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Like every director around that time started out making 8mm movies.
Similarly to Stanley Kubrick, Anderson didn't get good grades in high school and struggles to get into college. However, he spent a year studying literature at Emerson College in Boston.
Yeah, he talked about how his grades sucked, and he was like, oh, I should get into USC or NYU Film School, and he couldn't because his grades were bad. He got into Emerson College and studied literature for his professor was David Foster Wallace. Do you know who that is?
No?
He was this author who, from how I know, he wrote like a couple books, but he's known as like a legendary author because one of the books he did was called Infinite Jest, and it's like this 1,300-page book with all these footnotes, and it's notoriously hard to finish because it's just so laborious to read.
Mm-hmm.
And at what point is that just not a good book?
Yeah, right?
I don't know much
Just
about. I don't want to
stick to
speak
it.
out of term because I don't know much about him. I
Yeah,
saw a
but
Charlie
have you
Rose
read that
interview.
book?
Huh?
Have you read that book or no?
No.
Oh.
I have a 6th grade reading level. Why do you think I read that book?
Yeah, I can tell by the...
But that was kind of a big deal. His professor being David Foster Wallace, and that was around the time I guess he was sort of popular, or maybe just before. But he talks about how he was like the first teacher that he really liked, because there was one time, it was the night before a essay was due, and he called him at like midnight. And was, I just need help with, I want to add some more meat onto this thing. I'm not sure. And David Foster Wallace was, all right, let's. And then he helped him. And it was clear that he did a paper on White Noise by Don DeLillo. And he was very generous and stuff.
Mm-hmm. But it was clear that he wasn't actually working on it.
No, he was. He just kind of waited till he panicked the last minute, going, did I put enough into this?
Oh, okay.
Yeah. He talked about how he loved being at Emerson studying with David Foster Wallace, because he went to NYU. He got into NYU, and he was there for 3 days. And the story that he told famously on Charlie Rose was he walked in the first day, and the professor said, "All right, if you're here to write Terminator 2, then leave now, you dumb idiot." I added that part. He didn't say that.
Yeah.
And
for dramatization.
Yes. And Anderson goes, "Well, that's terrible. What if there's a kid there who wants to write Terminator 2? Like, that's what he likes. Let him do it."
Yeah.
But the professor was basically saying, we write films here. We write The English Patient. I don't know.
Yeah.
And then he talked about how the first assignment was to write a page of script action without any dialogue that revealed the character trait. And Paul Thomas Anderson was talking about, I think his mom got him the script somehow for David Mamet's Hoffa movie. And there was a page where Danny DeVito's character, or I think Danny DeVito's character, is driving along, and he puts a lit cigarette in between his fingies, so that it
His fingies?
yeah, so that when it burns all the way through, it wakes him up. He doesn't fall asleep at the wheel. And Anderson was, that's perfect. I'll write that. And he sent that in as his project, and he got a C+. So David Mamet, who's like a Pulitzer Prize winning writer, got a C+ in that class.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when Anderson decided, I'm out of here, pal.
Yeah. It's pretty ironic that professor would probably have loved some of Paul Thomas Anderson's films.
And now that professor's like, I taught Paul Thomas Anderson. I taught him everything he needs to know. Remember that shot in There'll Be Blood with the oil derrick? That's the coolest thing ever. My idea.
Yeah.
So he left because he wanted to be back at Boston. I don't think he went back to Boston. I think he just went back to LA and started working as a production assistant.
The Dirk Diggler Story, 1988. The genesis of the Dirk Diggler story came out of Anderson's fascination with the porn industry that existed in the periphery of his life growing up in Studio City.
He always talked about how he would go to, there was a story he would go to his grandma's house, and one time he saw these really nice cars pull up and these really hot girls go into this one house across the street, and he would look at porn growing up, trying to find like the front window of the house in there. He goes, I think I found it a few times. Maybe I was just tricking myself. And then he talked about how sometimes there would be, in his neighborhood there'd be like a warehouse with a bunch of signs, and then outside one of the doors in the warehouse there'd be no signs, and he'd be like, "There's probably porn going on in there. I gotta see what's happening." But one of the things that really informed, or I guess two that informed the Dirk Diggler story, the concept, was This Is Spinal Tap, which was like the first big mockumentary type. That basically started the genre. And then there was a documentary called Exhausted, John C. Holmes, The Real Story. And I tried to watch it. I couldn't find it anywhere. I found a commentary on YouTube of Paul Thomas Anderson talking over it, which I listened to, which I'll link that below. And that basically is the documentary in Boogie Nights that Amber Waves makes about Dirk Diggler and how great he is and stuff like that. He was basically doing a riff off of this documentary, which was made by a woman named Julia St. Vincent instead of Jessie St. Vincent in the movie. And this woman directed this documentary on John C. Holmes, basically saying, "Oh, he's such a great guy." And Anderson talked about how there was such a strange, dark comedy in it because obviously this was so ridiculous, but it was bad at the same time. So it was sort of depressing, but also funny. And that really informed.
Yeah, you can tell it informs this because
Yeah.
this is so funny, and then it gets really dark.
Yeah.
Like right towards the end, you're just like, oh.
And there's lines and even characters that are ripped straight from the song, "You Got the Touch." It's in there, word for word. Like he just had that.
It sounds better in this.
Yeah?
In this, to me, it sounded better.
You think Mike Stein, the guy who plays Dirk Diggler in the Dirk Diggler story, is a better singer than Marky Mark?
Yeah.
Dang.
Just in because I think in this it turns out to be a big hit. The song ends up being a big hit.
Does it?
Yeah, that was one of the points.
Oh.
Because he goes to this career in music, and the song ends up being a big hit.
Oh shit!
And it literally just sounds like a Bruce Springsteen song or something,
right?
You know, and so that was what drove him to become more of a drug addict. Basically.
Oh, okay.
More money, more problem kind of thing. So I actually like the song better in this.
Interesting. I mean, I like because we talked about with Stanley Kubrick. He went through his "I'm going to make a film about suicide" phase that everybody goes through.
Yeah. Where
you either make a video, like a short film about a kid walking into the woods or committing suicide, or both, which I did. Don't look it up. Yeah. But in this, he just goes straight to this weird, subversive, very particular comedy. And it's very interesting. I mean, if my kid made that at 17, I'd be like, what?
Yeah, I would be.
Because that's such a deep knowledge at 17 of how the porn industry works. A very mature thing. And you're like, how long has he been watching this? Since he was 7?
Yeah,
like,
definitely.
Shit.
Just could see it going on. It was the world he grew up in or around. Maybe not directly
he saw it, yeah.
Yeah, he could see it going on. But there's a lot of things in this that were so good that he just put straight into Boogie Nights.
Yeah, they were good. They were good enough to stay intact.
Yeah. Years later, Alan Parker, director of Mississippi Burning and Midnight Express, recalled a time when a teenage Anderson chased down his car and gave him a copy of the Dirk Diggler story on VHS.
Yeah, so there was an interview after Phantom Thread came out where Alan Parker did an interview with Paul Thomas Anderson about the movie, and he talked about I went to dinner or some shit, and I'm driving, I'm in my convertible, and I see this skinny dumb kid. Yeah, he's like talking shit to him to his face because I see this dumb idiot kid running up with a VHS, and I don't think he even handed it to me. I think he like hooked it over my window and just threw it in, and then he
forced him to take it.
Yeah, he's like, take it,
take my movie.
And then a few days later, it was just sitting on his, the kitchen counter, let's say, and his son was like, "Hey, Dad, are you gonna watch this thing?" He goes, "Yeah, I guess I'll watch it." And then he watched it, and he thought it was brilliant. And then he was like, "Are you going to give him a job?" And he went, "Nah." I don't know if that happened. But that was just a funny story of how he committed. And also, I don't know, Alan Parker, maybe he was a hot director at the time, physically, but also career-wise. And because he did Mississippi Burning and the Midnight Express, that was a while ago. But Mississippi Burning was a big movie at the time. So maybe he was like a hot director that everybody knew. Because that's a director that's kind of impressive for a 17-year-old kid to like track down that director, not Scorsese or Spielberg, but that guy. Not that he's a bad director, he's just not that well known, which is interesting. That just speaks to his film knowledge. He might have also
just been giving his stuff to everybody.
It just turned out he was a director.
Yeah. Over the next 10 years, Anderson expanded the story into a feature-length mockumentary, but eventually wrote as a straight narrative, which became Boogie Nights.
Yes.
We've talked about that, but not talked about it, but as I
No,
said,
we already talked about it. We're way ahead of this dossier. We're so much smarter than the guy who wrote this dossier.
Well, like I said, this obviously Dirk Diggler is the main character in Boogie Nights, but there's so many good things that come out of this.
I mean,
he came up with when he was 17.
But also Bob Ridgely's in it too, and he plays the Colonel in Boogie Nights.
Yeah.
Who looks at his dick at the pool and goes, "Thank you, Eddie." But in this, he plays Jack Horner, and also there's a thing that's cut out of Boogie Nights where Dirk is basically gay or bisexual. He has like a gay relationship with Reed Rothschild.
Yeah. That was very interesting. But still, the love between those two characters and even the other character, you can tell when they're talking about loving him, the man character, his gay interest or gay love interest is actually in love with him. And then the other girl, the other porn star, and she talks about it. You get the sense that she just loves him as like a brother or something, as the other character in Boogie Nights does.
Yeah, well, they even in this, because one of the big things about Boogie Nights is like the idea of the surrogate family.
Yeah.
And even in this, he had that idea, and then he didn't realize it until Boogie Nights was done. That he wasn't conscious of that being a theme in the movie. You understand?
That's pretty crazy.
Yeah,
that he wasn't conscious of that, because at the end of even this, when he passes away, he's surrounded by all those people. The acting in this was really good too.
Yeah, and
I got choked up a little bit.
Did you?
I did, because they're talking about they get really choked up. What's John C. Reilly's character in
Reed
this?
Rothschild? Well, he's not in it.
I know,
Boogie
but
Nights.
his
the Reed Rothschild, the most jacked man of all time.
dude, jacked.
It's insane. Like, what a downgrade physically in the next movie.
John C. Reilly was like, I have to play this guy?
You got 1 month.
You have 1 month, yeah. No, but I felt like they did a really good job.
At first, it opens, I'm like, okay, 17 years old. And then I, like, halfway through, I'm like, I forgot that this was a 17-year-old made this.
Yeah,
and I forgot that this is fake.
Yeah,
it's still, like, pretty, like, raw in terms of the raw talent behind it. It's very strong.
Once the coffee is poured and the tip of the cigarette is lit and placed in the ashtray, then we will address the matter.
Cigarettes and Coffee, 1993. Anderson spent some years working as a production assistant on various sets and wrote screenplays in his free time. One of these screenplays was Cigarettes and Coffee.
So one of the things that he did on a set that you're really not supposed to do is he was working on a PBS movie that was starring Philip Baker Hall, and who was his favorite actor that he saw in Midnight Run and other movies. Secret Honor, which is a Robert Altman movie from '84. It's a one-man show about Richard Nixon, and he plays Nixon. And he went up to him on set and went, look, I know I'm not supposed to do this, but you are the man. You're my favorite actor, and here's a script that I wrote. Read it. And Philip Baker Hall did, and he loved it. And he agreed to be in the movie if he ever made it. And the idea behind Cigarettes and Coffee came from, he was just practicing writing. And he goes, well, the easiest way to practice writing is just have two characters sit down at a coffee shop talking. And you do that enough, and sometimes it just blossomed into the story. And it was kind of inspired, so in basically the premise of the movie is there's 3 different threads going on, where there's a husband and wife, there's Philip Baker Hall and this other guy, and then there's this seedy guy who walks in, and they're all connected by this $20 bill. And so it sort of has like an Altman-esque feel to it, that kind of interconnectivity. But in the beginning, Philip Baker Hall's character is very adamant about these weird rules that he has for having a conversation before they have coffee. He goes, once the cigarette is lit and the coffee is poured, then we will get to the matter at hand. And he talked about how that derived from his dad going out to get coffee with his dad. And he always had these rules where basically he goes, yeah, one time I was really busy and my dad goes, hey, let's go fucking get some coffee. And he goes, no, I'm busy. I got to do stuff with my car. And he goes, we'll get coffee, and then we'll do the thing with the car. It's fine. Come on, let's just go. You don't have to talk to me in the car. Let's just go get coffee. Come on. So he dragged him out, and he always had these rules It wasn't exactly like, oh, the cigarette must be lit now. But he did have a thing where like, no, we're not talking until we get to the coffee, that sort of thing.
You just have to sit there in silence.
Yeah, then they would talk and it'd be fine.
Yeah, yeah. How? I know we're on this, but how was his relationship with his father?
Pretty good.
Pretty good.
Yeah.
You would think otherwise from like some of the other like the surrogate family thing going on in a lot of his films. You would think he's searching for that.
Like the relationship between Dirk and Jack Horner.
Yeah.
Or Hard Eight and with Sydney and John.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or even Magnolia.
Yeah, that's why
There Will Be Blood.
Mm-hmm.
Dang, he's got a lot of dad movies.
Yeah. That's one of the things I noticed looking through them all. It made me wonder. That's why I just asked. So, okay. So the making of Cigarettes and Coffee was reportedly a little hectic.
Yeah, there's not a lot of detail about that, but there is. He was a very confident, inexperienced kid. I think he was like maybe 21, 22 at the time, and he allegedly fired his cinematographer. The budget was $20,000. It was raised privately. I think his dad put in some money to it, and he borrowed a camera from somebody who worked at Panavision. I think it was Panavision, not sure, but he was able to rent a 35 millimeter camera, and so that basically saved on the mini. He was like, I'll borrow it for a weekend, and then he ended up needing it for 6 weeks.
You guys just like, come on, I need that camera back.
Yeah,
because that's an expensive
it's
rental.
so expensive,
6
dude.
weeks with it.
It's so much money.
He knew what he was doing the whole time, I feel like. So, Cigarettes and Coffee was accepted into the 1993 Sundance Festival Shorts program, and Anderson was invited to the 1994 Sundance Lab, where he developed the story for his first feature film. Hard Eight, 1996. Originally titled Sydney, the story of Hard Eight was informed by Anderson's own experiences working at casinos in Reno.
Yeah, he talked about how he would be working out there and he would see these old guys who were just super cool and all they did was bet, but they would bet so much and they were sort of these high rollers that the hotel or the casino would just comp them rooms. And that's what basically how they live their life. In the movie, Sydney lives his life like that.
Yeah.
He's sort of a drifter that just goes from casino to casino. But one of the fun stories that Anderson told was the rate card scam that they do in that movie where Sydney goes, okay, buy a rate card. Here's $100 or whatever. And he buys the rate card to keep track of his winnings and losings. And then he goes to a slot, then cashes in the rate card, and then gets chips from the rate card. And then I forget exactly how it goes, but then it gives him like a net profit on the rate card. That was a scam that Anderson used to do, where he was low on money. He was like, all right, let me do this for a couple hours, and then he'd just make $2,000.
That's something that amazes me about him in general is it seemed like he did a bunch of things before, and he was so young.
Yeah.
When did he have time to do casino scams? He was making movies at 17.
Yeah, exactly. Well, he talked about how he was living, I think around the time he wrote Hard Eight, he was living with his dad, just working in Reno.
Yeah.
And that's when he was that's when his dad was like, come on, let's go get coffee and stuff like that. And he said he loved living with his dad. It was fun. And then he wrote, while he was at the Sundance Lab, he obviously developed this story, and they did scenes with other actors. Because the whole point of the Sundance Lab is to develop a feature script. So he came up with this idea. He based it off of he based the opening scene basically off the same jump point as Cigarettes and Coffee, just two guys talking over coffee.
Yeah, I was assuming because one of the first lines in Hard Eight have to do with cigarettes and coffee.
Yeah.
I'm just a man who wants to buy you
cigarettes and coffee. Looks at the camera.
Remember
that one?
Reicher Entertainment financed the movie for a $3 million budget, and filming got underway with a main cast of Philip Baker Hall, John C. Reilly, Gwyneth Paltrow, and Samuel L. Jackson. Anderson was 24 or 25 years old.
It's crazy that he got a movie with that cast at that age. Well, he even talks about now, he's still, I was way too young. I can't believe they gave me the keys to the car. I was so young. He talks about, I was this 23-year-old, skinny kid who was just sitting outside the executive's doors being like, give me my movie back. Because the whole thing, what happened with that is they took the movie away from him at one point. During filming, they were constantly like, don't do this, don't do that. And I think he just cut off connection with them. It was like, I'm not talking to them anymore. Mm-hmm. And then during post-production, he edited a cut of the movie together. and it was like 2.5 hours long. And he was young, so he was like, I'm not changing a frame of it.
Yeah, yeah.
And they eventually fired him.
That's crazy.
And what he did was steal a print of the movie and then submitted it to Sundance in New York. I think it was wherever. He went to New York to submit it in Sundance. And then Reicher got wind of this and we're like, well, shit. So they sent their own cut of the movie. And then Sundance chose Paul Thomas Anderson's cut.
Nice.
So then Reicher had to be, all right, fine. I guess you can be on the movie again. But here's what we're going to do. You can't, you can have final cut, but you have to fund the rest of the editing. And he just got paid for Boogie Nights at the time because this movie had been basically almost shelved, taken away from him for so long after that prolonged production period. And they go, you can have the final edit, but we get to keep the title, which they changed to Hard 8, which he hated because it sounded like a porno.
Yeah.
Which was, kind of prophetic, I guess. But he still calls it Sydney. This movie sort of called Hard 8 or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and call it Sydney.
So he said something about how they had made edits to his cut or something like that.
Yeah, he wanted it to be widescreen, and then they made it so they cropped it so it was more of a box, like 1:8:5 aspect ratio. And I don't know if they did anything else other than I guess every frame was changed at that point because you're changing every frame with the aspect ratio.
Yeah, he said there were some shots where he had really long dolly shots.
Yeah, and they wanted to cut them.
They did cut into it, and He couldn't really do anything.
Yeah, it was that shot where Philip Baker Hall goes, walks down the floor, and that just a shot of holding on him of walking down, being all cool and shit.
Hard 8 was released in a few theaters on February 28th, 1997. It got positive reviews, but did not recoup its $3 million budget at the box office.
Yeah, the release was buried. They just released it in a few theaters, and we're like, screw you. We hate your movie. We hate you. Get out of here. And so it made like $200 million. No, it made $200,000.
$200,000?
It made $200,000 off a $3 million budget. Can you imagine if it made $200 million? I think the movie's good because the thing that sets it apart, I don't think anything in the subject matter is anything we haven't seen before because there's a lot of movies that take place with casinos and their scams and hey, we're going to make some money and I think it's very hard to mess up the kind of procedural stuff like that of scamming people. That's always interesting. But I think what I thought was most impressive about the movie is how good Anderson was already at like peripheral characters, where usually if a young writer or an inexperienced writer is writing a movie, the cop character is the cop. He's not John the cop, he's just cop. And in this, the bride and groom that he meets at the slot machines aren't just bride and groom. They are bride and groom, but the bride has a neck brace on for some reason. So that scene, mechanically, that scene works if it's just because it's during the scam, the rate card scam, and Philip Baker Hall is narrating. Here's what you're gonna do. You're gonna go back to the slot machine and then play for another 20 minutes. All Anderson needed to do was just show John at the slot machine and just pull it, and then that's all we need to know. But when John goes back, we see there's a bride and groom there. All right, you didn't have to do that, but now it's interesting. But then we see that she has a neck brace on, and you're like, well, what the hell happened to her?
Yeah, what's going on with these people?
Exactly. So now a scene that I should never think about again is being talked about on this podcast because it's so interesting.
Yeah. It's just a random thing that's added in, and it just gives life to the scene.
Exactly, and it doesn't slow down the movie. It's on an extra 5 minutes of seeing there's some character stuff. It's just this perfect little thing to put in there. There's another scene where Clementine is talking to Sydney at a diner, and they say the tagline of the scene. They're like, this is the final line to get the plot moving. And then all of a sudden you just hear like a screech and this guy get up and go, fuck this, I'm out of here. And there's two girls with them. And you're like, well, now what the hell happened there? So either he was a guy who bought them dinner and thought that, and they told him if they bought him dinner, or he bought them dinner, they'd have sex with him. And then they're like, hey, we're not going to have sex with you. And he's like, God damn it. Or could that be his girlfriend who just came out as a lesbian with her lesbian lover, and he's like, fuck this, I'm out of here. Like, what is going on? Same thing. I'm talking about it on the podcast now. which is, normally it would be a scene I would never think about again. There's stuff like that I just think is so impressive.
He's just pissed they didn't want to split a short stack with him.
Wait, how many pancakes did you have? I ordered 5 and you had 3? I paid for this.
Fuck this, I'm out of here.
And then Clementine just like, ooh.
Yikes.
Yeah. Also, I think I think Paul Thomas Anderson's first 2 movies have this. I got too close to him when I said 2. They have this weird theme about stupidity, where a lot of it is defending their stupidity. There's a scene where Clementine. It's during that scene in the middle that it's that giant intersection of the movie where things have gotten bad. And you realize that Clementine and John and I guess Sydney are just shitty people who are in this shitty, crummy situation.
Yeah.
But you like them because you've gotten to know them, and they feel so real because of the things we just said, like the character beats. And then Clementine goes, "We'll see how stupid I am when I get my money, won't we? I'm not stupid." And then John is like, "Oh my God, I'm so stupid," or whatever. And then Jimmy at the end, Sam Jackson, is talking to Sydney going, "You think I'm stupid? I'm not stupid." And it's subtle. It's not like a big, giant game changer theme, but it's in there somewhat. And it's in there in Boogie Nights, which we'll talk about. And there's also another thing that I really, 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 really like that involves Clementine when Sydney agrees to help them out. And he goes, "You're going to have to skip town for a while." And that scene can easily just be Clementine and Sydney going, "Bye, thanks for everything. I'll see you later, pal." And then they leave. But instead, Clementine goes, "Wait, can you feed my cats while I'm gone?" And he goes, "Yeah." So now that takes his gesture to help them one step further.
Mm-hmm.
And that's already a lot of information. Like, oh, she has cats. I didn't know that about her. She has a life outside this movie. And then she goes, and also here's the key, when you use it, only stick it in halfway or else it won't open. It's like, we don't need to know that, but that's
small little
those
things.
2 details just add to her character so well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the small little details that just give more life to everything outside, which makes everything inside of the film feel more alive.
It feels like the characters don't exist for the movie. The movie exists for the characters. What did you think about this movie?
I really did like it. I thought that for him to make a first feature-length film that has that much liveliness and shows what a casino was really like at that time, it was just enjoyable to see that atmosphere, because this film looks like it smells like cigarettes.
Yeah. I mean, it should be if it was named after or derived from a short called Cigarettes and Coffee.
Yeah.
Also, everybody's smoking cigarettes in the 90s.
Exactly.
That's when cigarettes peaked, probably.
You think?
I don't know. That's when it was probably the coolest to smoke cigarettes, because that was after people
still
knew.
Cool.
That was when people knew that they were bad, but it's still like, I know.
Yeah, whatever. Yeah, the most dangerous. They know it's dangerous. They're
exactly.
Still just chugging away on them.
I do think Hard 8, when you look at other movies in the genre, does have even though it's not like Anderson's best, and I think it's just good, it's not at the same level as its peers. You could tell it's just there's something a little bit better about it. And I think thematically, the thing that's really interesting is it has my favorite shot, probably one of my favorite shots to end a movie on, which is, so basically, long story short, Sydney finds a desperate John sitting outside a coffee shop, and he goes, "Hey, let me help you." Then cut to 2 years later, we don't find out why Sydney wants to help John so much. And then we learn that Jimmy knows why Sydney wants to help John, or is helping John so much after they have to go on the run. And he goes, "You shot his father in the face." and then so it turns out he's doing this because, and also we learn that he has 2 children who are Clementine's age, John and Clementine's age. He has a daughter and a son.
Mm-hmm.
And basically to compensate for, and he talks about how he doesn't really talk to them anymore. That can be him trying to compensate for the fact that he was a failed father by trying to look out for Clementine and John, because he takes a liking to Clementine very quickly. He doesn't really know her that well until they have a conversation, and it could be that she just reminds him of his daughter.
Mm-hmm.
And then the movie setting up his character as to go through a very redemptive arc. And then he tells Jimmy, when Jimmy's threatening him with the gun, "Hey, like, I'll shoot you in the face."
Mm-hmm.
he goes, I don't want to die. He goes, I'll sacrifice all my money for John's livelihood, but I will not sacrifice my own life for John's livelihood. And so right there, it shows that he's not willing to die for John, which would be the logical conclusion of a more redemptive arc, where he dies to keep the secret safe, or he dies to save John, or something like that. But then so it's not a redemptive arc, but what it ends up being is just him doubling down on the person who he was trying to stop being. He basically doubles down on being the guy who killed John's dad. Because the final shot, he kills Jimmy and then goes to the same coffee shop where the movie started, and he sees that there's some blood on his shirt, and he just takes his sleeve and literally covers up the blood.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's such a perfect final shot.
You just can't escape that past
life
that he lived. Or you could look at it as he's willing to kill for John, but in a selfish way. Like,
yes.
He only kills that guy because he doesn't want to ruin his relationship that he has with John.
Right.
It's almost selfish because Jimmy's not in any danger.
He wins, but not in a heroic way, or not a particularly
not the way he
way.
wanted to win.
Right. It's like it's not again. That's I guess that just speaks to Anderson's ability to operate in gray areas at such a young age. Where it's not, he doesn't have a heroic, redemptive. Because my first instinct would just be like, oh, have him die. That'll be emotional. I don't know. But in this, it's like, no, it's not that simple.
Boogie Nights, 1997. After a tumultuous production on Hard 8, Anderson channeled all the frustration of his movie being taken away from him into the script for Boogie Nights.
Yeah, he didn't channel it in a literal sense where Boogie Nights was about a filmmaker murdering an executive for, but he channeled that energy to be like, I'm going to prove these guys wrong. I'm going to make the best movie of all time.
Yeah, yeah.
Which he got pretty close to doing.
Fuck yeah.
Because Boogie Nights is the most fun movie I've ever seen, maybe.
It's my favorite movie. Ever.
Yeah?
Personally, yeah.
Interesting. Do your favorite movies about porn, Danny?
Yeah, I'm a sick bastard. I'm a very bad guy.
Damn it. But I guess that's all I have to say about that. That whatever you just said just wiped my memory bank.
I'm sorry. I'll go. Anderson's first choice for Dirk Diggler was Leonardo DiCaprio, but he declined in order to star in Titanic. Big mistake. However, DiCaprio suggested Mark Wahlberg for the role.
Yeah, and it wasn't Leo having to convince Paul Thomas Anderson to take Mark Wahlberg.
Yeah.
Paul Thomas Anderson liked Mark Wahlberg because he saw him in the Basketball Diaries, and he goes, "This guy's really good. He's not just." I guess he was a rapper,
Marky
singer.
Mark.
He was Marky Mark.
Yeah.
I only know the Good Vibrations song that that's the only Marky Mark song that I know.
Yeah.
Yo, it's about that time. Don John's a good
I think
movie.
that's like
Don John.
I don't know. I don't know much about his career as a rapper, but I think that's his only good song.
I know a lot about his crimes when he was a teenager.
Yeah,
which we won't get into. But but he described Mark Wahlberg as this big ball of talent. Like, he's not trained at all, but he's absolutely fantastic. And when he was going around doing the casting, there wasn't really a movie like this, because it's about the porn industry, which is a very taboo thing at the time. I guess it still is now, but it was a non-moralistic take on it. So they heard porn, and were they like, is this saying that porn's bad? Is it saying that is it endorsing porn? What is it doing? I want to be careful with what I'm getting myself into here. And that was that conversation was almost came up with every actor. But with Mark Wahlberg, what he was concerned about is Paul Thomas Anderson talked about how he gave him the script, and then Mark Wahlberg called him and he goes, "Did you read the script?" And he goes, "Yeah, I read the first 30 pages. And Paul Thomas Anderson said, he was like, "This jerk only read 30 pages. Like, he's not going to be in my movie." And then Mark Wahlberg said, "I only read 30 pages because I love the first 30 pages, and I know I'm going to love the rest of it, but I just want to make sure you're not casting me or asking me to be in this movie because I'm the guy who can get in his underwear." And Anderson was like, "I don't know what you're talking about. I just thought I saw you in the Basketball Diaries. You're really good. Please be in the movie. Please, please, please." And then he said yes. And he also he cast Burt Reynolds as Jack Horner. He originally wanted Jack Nicholson. The script never got to him. I think Burt Reynolds ultimately was the best choice. Definitely. He wanted Warren Beatty as well, I forget. Maybe there was another guy as well who wanted, but he talked about Warren Beatty wanting to be. I want you to be in the movie, and Warren Beatty was on board until he found out that he wasn't going to play Dirk Diggler. That's a joke, but like that was a joke that Anderson made. But he goes, I think he was trying. I think he wanted to play Dirk Diggler. Yeah. I was like, I don't know, but
yeah. All right. During filming, Anderson and Burt Reynolds reportedly did not get along. Mark Wahlberg and John C. Reilly also got into it at one point.
Yeah, the cast has talked about why Burt Reynolds maybe didn't have the best time on that movie, and he was like a big star, and I guess they relatively didn't have that much money, so he had to share a trailer maybe with somebody, and he was with all these non-established people, and I guess maybe he felt like this was beneath him. Mm-hmm. Apparently the only person he got along with was Luis Guzman on the set.
Yeah.
There was the commentary tracks, which we'll get to. I think Mark Wahlberg was like, "Hey, Paul, is this the scene where Reynolds punched you in the gut?" And they talked like apparently Burt Reynolds punched Paul Thomas Anderson in the belly because they got in a big fight, and even because Anderson talks about how we had so much fun making it, which I guess was true probably, but they did have some times where everybody would fight.
Yeah.
Where there was another time where they were filming like the pool scene. It was one of the first scenes between Dirk and Reed Rothschild, and Mark Wahlberg and John C. Reilly. All of a sudden, Anderson just saw Reilly leave the set, and they were screaming at each other. And what happened is John C. Reilly showed up late to the set, and then Mark Wahlberg, who'd like to mess with people, I guess, and some other people were kind of leaning into him, being like, "Oh, maybe if you weren't so late, you would know your lines and stuff." Whenever he would, and then they got like they were fooling around, but then it escalated to like a real argument, and they were throwing marshmallows at him the whole time. They were just choking him with marshmallows, and then at one point, John C. Reilly turns around and Mark just beamed a marshmallow and hit him right in the forehead. And John C. Reilly just lost it and just walked off the set. I was like, I'm sick of this shit.
Just like childish stuff.
Exactly. And obviously they laugh about it now, but it was pretty funny.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, being on that set was probably so fun.
It was fun, but it was also crazy. Like, I think some of the cocaine energy translate. I'm sure some of the people on that set were on cocaine.
Probably.
But some of that translated to like the actual antics they would get into on set. There's a deleted scene where Becky Barnett calls Dirk because she's getting beat up by her husband Jerome, and she calls Dirk, and Dirk's like, "I'll be there in a second." And then Dirk goes and leaves, and since he's all fucked up, he's like smoking a cigarette, and then he's going like 90 miles an hour, and he's supposed to crash into a telephone pole, which is why why his Corvette is busted up later in the movie. And Paul just goes, "Hey, Mark, just crash into the thing, just crash into the telephone pole," and they didn't tell anybody else on set. So the cameras are rolling, and all of a sudden, Mark just slams into the pole.
Like full speed, or
I don't know how fast it was, but it was a full enough speed to where the hood like crumpled up and stuff. And that's just a crazy thing that happened. That's the biggest liability. Like your main star going to make him crash into a telephone pole and not tell your the stunt coordinator was pissed.
Oh, I bet. Yeah. As he should. You can't.
He was overreacting. He's probably on cocaine. I don't know.
Yeah. Mark Wahlberg probably was on cocaine. Who knows?
He might have been sober at this point.
Yeah,
because he was on cocaine when he was a kid. I don't know if he was sober at this point.
Mm-hmm. Possibly. Who knows? Maybe being in that atmosphere made him a little...
Maybe he hit his head in the accident and was like, I never need to do cocaine again.
Yeah, fixed his life.
It just fixed his brain.
Changed his life. He's like, I'm going to be jacked when I'm almost 50.
I'm going to make a clothing brand called Municipal and post every single day about it on Instagram.
Dude, he posts on Instagram a lot.
I'm going to get insanely jacked with the worst form anybody's ever seen. I like Mark Wahlberg.
No, he's great. He's in my favorite movie ever. With one of my favorite scenes ever. You know what scene that is?
Scotty trying to kiss Dirk.
No.
That is a great scene.
It's a great scene, but no, not that one. It's the donut shop scene.
Oh, yeah?
With Bucky. It's like, what that...
Buck Swope.
When I saw that for the first time, that is one of the first times I remember actually being on the edge of my seat for something.
Uh-huh.
I don't know why. I just cared so much about that specific character, and I was like, is he gonna fucking die? Like, fuck.
Yeah.
You know, just so because it's a
And also-
tense scene.
Also, it's like it's the first scene in the movie that has a very visceral sense of violence.
Mm-hmm.
Other times, people are
Almost
having
there.
drug overdoses or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But that was the first time where I'm in a crime. Now I'm in this dark crime movie.
Yeah.
And it fits so well somehow.
Mhm.
And it takes its time too. Buck doesn't go in there and go, "Let me get a donut." There's like a whole buildup of him getting the donuts. And be like, "Oh, those are cute. Give me some of those."
Yeah, exactly.
And that's probably what makes the scene is that buildup.
Because it seems like something that actually might happen. You know, some guy tries to save the day. And and shoots him. And
Oh, so well done too. The way he shoots and then like swipes the gun around and shoots it in mid. It's so well done.
And even that character, you know nothing about him.
Yeah,
But it turns to him and it's like, this guy has a gun.
Well, yeah, that's the thing about like the periphery characters is immediately you see that guy for a second and you know it's exactly what's about to happen.
He's sitting there almost looking as though he's been waiting for that to happen.
He's literally reading a magazine that's like I love guns.
Is it really?
I think it's a gun magazine. It basically says that.
The two commentary tracks were recorded for the home release, one with Anderson and one with Anderson and the cast.
Yes, I brought these up because they're insane, and they were at they were at like the end of the era of home media where people weren't sure what commentaries were. Yeah, we sit in front of we watch the movie and we say stuff. Okay, cool, and then people can watch it. Like they weren't. I don't know if how aware people were of what they were. And so on the first, Anderson knew what they were, of course, but the first one is Anderson just like high on whatever, maybe drunk. He's watching the movie by himself and he's rambling, which as he should in a commentary, the one with just him, the first one. And there's a scene which you can find on YouTube and it's a video titled "The Greatest Scene in a Commentary Ever." And Paul Thomas Anderson it's not about like Boogie Nights isn't about this or like anything like that. It's about this and that. And then it comes around and then you go there and he goes, and I'm sorry, I got to take a piss so bad I can't even fucking think. And then there's like 30 seconds of silence. And then the next thing you hear is you see Mark Wahlberg do cocaine. And then Paul Thomas Anderson goes, "This is a scene where Mark Wahlberg does cocaine." And that's what I think a lot of young people like about Paul Thomas Anderson is that he makes these movies where if you didn't know who he was, you'd think the guy who made him was like some boring grandpa. Where he's like, "Yes, I'm very smart and I make these movies." But then you find out he's this very unassuming guy who feels just like you. And he doesn't talk in flowery things. "Oh, I thought the existentialism about the thought." He's very accessible conversationally, which I think I like about him.
Just a guy eating pizza.
Exactly. He's just eating pizza. I saw a comment on that video, the interview you watched where Paul Thomas Anderson's eating pizza.
Yeah.
And the first comment is, "Believe it or not, the guy eating pizza talking about porn is one of the greatest filmmakers of the 21st century."
And then it cuts to him and he goes, I'll be the first to say it. I want to watch that guy fuck.
yeah, exactly.
And then he goes and makes Phantom Thread.
Yeah, exactly. Oh my God, we'll get to Phantom Thread.
Yeah,
But the second commentary is wild. It's the most balls to the wall thing. So Paul Thomas Anderson he made 6 commentaries. He watched it with like different members of the crew. So there was one where he was with Marky Mark. There was one he was with John C. Reilly and Don Cheadle. And then there was one where he was with Melora Waters and William H. Macy and then Luis Guzman. And first of all, it's one of the first things is Paul Thomas Anderson goes, "Do you think Louise was stoned in this scene?" And they go, "Oh, maybe. I'm not sure." And then it cuts to like 7 times him asking people, "Do you think Louise was stoned in this scene?" And that's all they talk about for like a 30-minute chunk of the movie. And also Melora Waters had kids. So in the entire, wherever they had the mic in the room to record, her kid like had a whooping cough. And it was just going the whole time.
Yeah.
And it's so funny. And they're in the middle of like describing like a very serious point, and then you just hear her kid with whooping cough just phlegm into the mic. And then, but the thing that's craziest about it is Mark Wahlberg and Paul Thomas Anderson were recording it together. And the whole time, Marky Mark's like, "I gotta go. I got a plane to catch." And Paul Thomas Anderson's, "Shut up, just stay here. We're already here doing it. Don't worry about it. 15 more minutes. He stays to the end.
Yeah.
But they're just watching the pool scene with when Spill the Wine's playing, and then Paul Thomas Anderson just goes, "You see that girl there? Did you fuck her?" And Mark Wahlberg goes, "No, but I wanted to." And I don't know if he realized what the commentary was they're talking about like that. And there's one thing that they describe at the end that I'm gonna look. If you're squeamish or you don't want to hear this, skip ahead 40 seconds. I'm getting 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, at the very last scene when they show Dirk Diggler's dick, all of a sudden Mark Wahlberg just goes, "Yeah, I broke my dick in half once." And Paul's like, "What?" And he goes, "Yeah, I was having sex and it slipped and then it cracked to the side."
Oh my!
He goes, "I went into the bathroom and I just saw my dick was all black, and and I just saw there was this big bubble, and I was panicking, and then I fell asleep in pain, and then I woke up the next morning and my penis was just all black, and it stayed like that for like 2 weeks, and then it went away."
What?
Like, Jesus Christ.
on a DVD commentary.
DVD commentary. And also, this is after he's like mad at Paul for missing his flight. He's just, it's crazy.
They're just hanging out.
Yeah. Oh, man. Anyway.
I get the sense that Mark Wahlberg doesn't miss flights. He just has to tell the private jet to wait
I mean, the only flight that he ever missed was the 9/11 one, apparently.
What?
He was supposed to be on the 9/11 flight.
How? What?
And then he didn't go, and he talked about how 9/11 would have went down differently if I was on that plane.
He says that?
I think he said that. I don't want to paraphrase.
Okay. Boogie Nights was released nationwide on October 31st, 1997. It received rave reviews and made $43 million off a $15 million budget. Julianne Moore and Burt Reynolds received Oscar nominations, and Anderson was nominated for Best Original Screenplay.
And I'm not sure how... Again, like I talked about earlier, it's a non-moralistic telling of the porn industry. And I think it was maybe a few years ahead of its time because, like I said, the apprehensions that the cast had about starring it, like what is it? What exactly is going on? I think a lot of, like a mainstream audience, let's say, was kind of cautious of what was really going on. Mm-hmm. But I think we talked about the peripheral characters in Hard 8. In this, there's almost no peripheral characters because the cast is so big that everybody feels like a main character almost. Mm-hmm. And the way, like we talked about the guy in the donut shop. As soon as you see that guy, you know what he's all about. Just it takes a second, right? Yeah. With every character in this movie, it takes a second to know who they are. Reed Rothschild. It takes 2. So the scene where Dirk comes to the pool party and he meets everybody, or Eddie Adams at that point, and he gets introduced to Reed by Jack Horner, and Jack goes, "All right, you two get to know each other," and then Reed says, "So Jack tells me he found you on the street," and Dirk's like, "No, I didn't. What? No." And he goes, "Oh, I thought I heard him say that you were living out on the street," and then he spends the rest of the scene trying to one up Dirk, and I know who Reed Rothschild is. Or Buck Swope, where he's like, "Hey, how about my new outfit?" Yeah. In the beginning, he's like, "Oh, it's nice." Yeah. It's like, oh, that's his thing, and it's just so well done. But going back to what I think is interesting is all these characters, right at the end, all the character stories are weaved through each other effortlessly. That's the very Altman thing about it, is how well it handles all these characters, but. We talked about Scotty before. I think Scotty is like the most tragic character in the movie. Maybe who ends up the worst, maybe. Besides the Colonel, who like deserves it. But with Scotty, if you look at the end of the movie, every character has like a new frontier or like a restored equilibrium that they go through. Dirk is back making movies with Jack vice versa. Buck Swope has his radio store and he's married and he has kids. Luis Guzman opens up the nightclub. His brothers come up from Puerto Rico and become part owners in the nightclub. Amber Waves becomes a commercial director, and they all have a new thing going on. But the only character who doesn't really have anything going on is Scotty. When we first meet Scotty, he instantly has a crush on Dirk. He goes up to him, talks to him. Immediately, Dirk's attention is caught by somebody else, the Colonel, and they go, "Come over here," and their conversation is cut short. The next time Scotty interacts with Dirk, he has to get him from the dressing room during the first porno scene. And the whole time he's like, "Oh, Dirk, you look really sexy." Mm-hmm. And he's like, "Can you give me a few minutes?" And then he's just like, oh shit, let me get out of here. And then when he he escorts Dirk to the set, and he's chewing on this pen. And it's like a very suggestive thing about him having this oral fixation, basically translating him chewing on that pen to wanting to like do stuff with Dirk. And every time they go through a doorway when these walk, it's very funny. Every time they go through a doorway, they make sure to go at the same time, so they have to sandwich their way through each doorway to just make it extra awkward. And then of course he's doing the sound, and then Dirk shows his dick to everybody, and he's like almost drooling. Yeah,
He's like,
but then that scene is basically the last time Scotty is in the movie's forefront consciousness until the midpoint. And until that, we just see Scotty in like regulated to the background where Dirk wins the award, and there's a small little thing where Dirk goes around the entire table and like hugs everybody and shakes their hand, and then when Scotty goes to, if you blink and you'll miss it, Scotty goes to high five him, and Dirk just goes, not because Dirk is mean or anything, he just didn't see him because he's not in Dirk's head like Scotty wants him to be. And there's a lot of stuff like that, like body language stuff that's very, very well done. But then in the midpoint, I know I'm going on, but this is good.
no.
In the midpoint, finally, Scotty gets Dirk's attention. He's like, hey, I got a new car, and Dirk is genuinely happy for him. They go out to go see it. Todd Parker and Reed Rothschild get Dirk's attention, and Scotty's like really nervous. Like, well, do you want to go see the car? And they go out there. Dirk's genuinely happy. He is at the forefront of Dirk's consciousness for a second. He finally has his full attention until Dirk goes, wait, what time is it? We're going to miss the ball drop. His attention, again, diverts somewhere else. And then he just kisses him. And he's like, Scotty, God, come on, man.
Yeah.
And Mark Wahlberg on the commentary talked to Paul Thomas Anderson because you want Dirk to kind of kiss Scotty back because you feel bad for Scotty so much. And Mark Wahlberg talked about how he told Paul Thomas Anderson, I kind of feel like he should kiss him or something, or give him like like it shouldn't. I don't know if I want it to end this, badly for Scotty.
Yeah.
And Paul Thomas Anderson's like, no, it has to end this way. And then Scotty, of course, goes, fucking idiot, fucking idiot. He says it like 6 times too many, which makes it even sadder.
Yeah.
That's another thing about the theme of idiocy or whatever, or defending one's intelligence. And then that's already super sad. It's the saddest scene, what I think is one of the saddest scenes of the movie. But then it sucks extra much for Scotty because everybody gets this new equilibrium at the end, except for Scotty. We just see him at the final scene, that final shot through the house. He's just unloading stuff on a truck with that guy Rocky, who's barely had a line, and he's not even in the house with everybody. And then the movie ends. It's the last time we see of him. There's never a scene where Dirk goes, "Hey, thanks, Scotty, for sticking with me."
Yeah,
or thanks for being my friend. Because Scotty was there when Dirk was going through addiction, and he'd be like, guys, maybe you shouldn't go to Rahad Jackson's house because this looks really dangerous. And they're like, shut the fuck up, Scotty. And this poor guy is like, it's like, he doesn't get anything. And also he's gay. And it's the 80s, and AIDS is going to happen. And he's going to have to go through that.
Yeah,
His life is not going to get better. Poor Scotty, man.
Poor Scotty.
Philip Seymour Hoffman was such a great actor.
Yeah.
Oh, my God.
Yeah. He plays a lot of... He's always sort of a background character in Paul Thomas Anderson's
Except
movies.
for the Master.
Other leading up to the
He's
Master.
always like a supporting guy, and I guess he was always a supporting guy.
But
Paul
they
Thomas
always have their moment on the screen where it's fantastic.
Every character in that movie has that scene.
Well, yeah,
they have their scene. It's insane how well he was able to balance that.
What about what happens right after, in terms of sad characters? What happens right after?
Oh, maybe Little Bill.
I was thinking like he had it pretty bad.
Yeah, but his is kind of comedic, I guess.
Yeah, there is comedy in there, but it's also, I mean, when she's first getting,
yeah, that's true.
And they're all just standing over her, and he just goes,
yeah.
What does he say? He says something like, "My wife's got an ass in her dick," or
no.
something.
So the line was, "My wife has a cock in her ass." I'm not really focused on the photography of the film, but instead in the movie he goes, "My wife has an ass in her cock," so I'm not focused on the photography of the film, and they just kept it in.
Yeah.
There's a lot of great stuff like that. Ricky Jay, who plays I think Kurt or Bert, who plays the guy who's Little Bill's talking to in that scene. He was like a master magician, apparently. I didn't know that about him. But there was one thing that Paul Thomas Anderson talked about where the scene where Dirk and Burt Reynolds or Jack are fighting, And Dirk's like, "You're not an actor, man. You're not an actor. You're the boss of me." Jack goes, "Nevertheless, you can't do a film like this." And every time Jack would say "nevertheless," Ricky Jay would always like start to laugh. And he goes, "Ricky, what are you doing? Why do you keep laughing?" And he tells him a story about how there was like this football game, and there was these commentators, and somebody walked by, and there was like I forget exactly how, but there was like a woman during like a show singing in the middle or singing the national anthem, and let's say the woman's name was like Michelle Jones. Somebody walks by and goes, "Michelle Jones sucks cock," and the announcer goes, "Nevertheless." So that's why every take in the movie, he just couldn't stop laughing.
Couldn't stop laughing.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's so many. I want to. Remember how when we were talking about the Dirk Diggler story?
Yeah.
How I liked the song better.
Yes.
I also liked. I forgot to bring this up, but there's such a funny part in the Dirk Diggler story.
What is it?
He goes, because this is something that carries over where I think the Dirk Diggler is going, maybe just turn down the bass and bring up the vocal, yeah. And then, but in the Dirk Diggler story, he goes, "Yeah, I think we should just speed it up, like maybe a few octaves."
Yeah.
And octaves and speed have nothing to do with anything. He's just like coked out. Does he say that in Boogie Nights?
In Boogie Nights, he says something about like, "Can we crank it up a few octaves or something?"
Yeah.
I don't know if because I noticed that last night.
Mm-hmm.
I think. That scene is it's pretty similar. It's expanded in Boogie Nights, but I don't know if he says speed it up a couple of octaves in the movie.
Good.
That was really good.
That's a that could go over a lot of people's heads.
Yeah.
But I just thought it was so funny.
And that speaks to what I said about people defending their stupidity in these movies. Eddie Adams' mom. He has sex with Roller Girl in front of Burt Reynolds or Jack Horner. Then he goes home the next morning and his mom's waiting for him, and she's going, "You're dumb. You're stupid. You're so dumb because you didn't finish high school." And he's like, "Shut up. I'm not dumb," or whatever. And then the rest of the movie kind of you never really. I think she might be right that he's dumb. Because you never see him have like a single critical deep thought. Anytime he's very, very nice at the beginning. And he's a very good person and very polite to everybody. But anytime it's time for him to have like a serious conversation, he never displays any intelligence. When he starts to get success in the porn industry, all he talks about is just making up leather. He's like, "Oh, this is imported Italian leather."
Yeah.
He's just talking about these superficial cultural consumerist things. He's not saying anything. There's a scene.
He also doesn't seem like he really knows what he's talking about.
Yeah, he's making it. He's literally making it up.
Yeah.
And so that's an interesting. I don't want to speak out of turn, but I saw somebody talk about maybe because his mom, I know, at first was kind of apprehensive about his film career, and maybe the mom thing in Boogie Nights had something to do, and like being an idiot has something to do with his relationship with his mom. Also, one of the themes of the movie, or I guess one of the midpoint collisions of the movie, is the transitory time of the pornography industry transitioning from film to video. And I think that thing going on in it kind of makes the movie exist out of its own time, where you can I think that maybe that was speaking to the transition between film and digital in Hollywood, because around this time, the first movie, like around 1997, the first movies were being written digitally on a computer, filmed digitally on a camera, and then edited digitally. That was like the first time that was happening, was the late 90s, early 2000s. And I think that could speak to that as well. But now, the analogy of that transitory time is also analogous to what's going on with theaters versus streaming. It's not the exact same thing, but I think that kind of makes the movie exist out of the 1980s, and you can it kind of, how do I explain this? It kind of, you can transpose that concept to any time we're living in now, basically.
Mm-hmm. And it's also, I guess, was it a subconscious thing of Paul Thomas Anderson thinking about how that transition may decrease the quality of certain aspects of making a film?
Yeah, I think
making movies.
Well, I think it was portraying like a sort of loss of innocence, because right after, because that conversation happens at the midpoint of the movie, with Lloyd Gondoli comes in. He's like, "Well, I like butter in my ass, and we got to start using videotape." And then everything goes downhill, and everything seems so perfect before that. So I think it's sort of greater society or greater economics getting into something that was just so fun and perfect or whatever. Even though I don't think it's necessarily endorsing pornography, because everybody's woes and joys in the movie are connected to them being in pornography. Like Jesse St. Vincent and Buck can't get a loan, and Paul Thomas Anderson doesn't portray that as the banker is the villain and Buck and Jesse are victims. It just, when I see that scene, I'm like, that's a good point. Like, they can't give a loan to a pornographer. But then Buck's like, no, I'm an actor. I want to this is a real business. I'm like, that's a good point too.
Yeah,
I'm not sure like who's right and wrong in the situation. It's sort of again a non-moralistic thing. But Jesse and Buck are also together because of their connections in the porn industry, right?
Yeah.
And it's every character has that thing where everything that's good in their life is because of porn, but everything that's bad in their life is also porn. I think it's a very non-moralistic thing. You brought up a thing to me about Buck and Jesse that I thought was interesting.
Which was?
The deleted scene between them.
Oh, yeah. Where he talks about how they tried to have sex like normal people, but they can't not get into being all, oh, fuck.
Oh, baby.
Oh, baby. And they keep doing that, and they're just like, forget about it. We can't even do that right. So it was more of a thing to show that they were just struggling to escape that world, and they didn't really want to be in it anymore.
Yeah, kind of like me right now with you.
Yeah. I hate you too. Magnolia, 1999. Hot off the success of Boogie Nights, Anderson was essentially given a blank check for his next project, in which Anderson initially set to make very small and cheap.
So on the outset, any director who had a big movie like Boogie Nights and was given a blank check would go, give me $100 million right now, or else I'm going to die. But what he initially did was, no, I want to make something small and cheap. It was only till later that it kind of ballooned into a very long and big movie. The budget's $37 million, which is for today is like 60-something million. So technically that's his biggest movie. But he talked about how all these ideas that he was thinking about in his head, it just kept adding on, and then afterwards a small movie eventually turned into something as giant as Magnolia, and a lot of it was very informed by what was going on in his personal life. I think Magnolia is probably his most, at least overtly, personal movie, because obviously his dad passed away in '97 and from cancer. And that's a big thing in Magnolia.
Takes a more serious turn, like straight from the jump of the movie, I feel like.
Yeah, it's like a guttural movie. Like he talks about how he wrote it from the gut. So it's this very emotional and maybe sometimes unpolished thing, you know?
While doing the press for Boogie Nights in the UK, Anderson visited the set of Stanley Kubrick's Eyes Wide Shut, where he met Kubrick, Nicole Kidman, and Tom Cruise.
So Tom Cruise saw Boogie Nights and then called Paul Thomas Anderson. And Paul Thomas Anderson said that's like getting a call from the president of the world, because Tom Cruise in the late '90s was the guy. He was the biggest star on the planet. So he tells Paul Thomas Anderson, "Hey, I want to be in your next movie." Also, he talks about when he met Stanley Kubrick. He said, "Yeah, I got to meet Stanley Kubrick. It was very nice. He was nice to me when he found out that I directed Boogie Nights, and he was really nice to me when he found out that I wrote Boogie Nights too." I guess Kubrick. Going back, because we talked about it in the last episode we did. Kubrick always was like dying to get his next movie out, but he could never find the subject matter that was good enough. And I guess he admired people who were able to just make up their own subject matter, which is why he admired Paul Thomas Anderson. And while he was there, he didn't have the script. He sort of had a few ideas around. He may have had the title Magnolia, because he said he had the title for Magnolia first. And he told Tom Cruise, like, all right, let me go write this thing, but I feel like I got something naughty for you to do, man. I don't know what it is, but I'll figure it out. And then 8 months later, he wrote the script. And it took him 8 months. He had the script. The last 2 weeks, he said most of the writing got done. He went to go stay up in William H. Macy's cabin in Vermont. And he said he was finishing it, and then he didn't want to leave because there was a snake outside the cabin, and he was scared to leave. So he was like, well, shit, I guess I just got to write this movie then. And he said most of the writing got done in that 2 weeks.
Filming began in January 1999 and lasted until June of that year, which was chronicled in the making of the documentary Magnolia titled That Moment.
So on the special features for the Magnolia, I guess, home video release, that documentary is awesome. It's 70 minutes long, and it chronicles day one of production all the way up to the premiere, where they're at the premiere. And I think it's amazing. And the reason it's called That Moment is because if you look in the script for Magnolia, which we got back here, since everything takes place at the same time, whenever he cuts to another scene, the time isn't day or night. The time is that moment, because everything's happening concurrently. So that's why the documentary is called That Moment. And it's amazing because you're getting to see the nuts and bolts of how a movie works. Anybody who's interested in like how exactly a movie is shot or filmed, or what roles people have on the set, should definitely watch that. You get to see the first shot of the movie being filmed. And Paul Thomas Anderson's like, all right, this is the first shot of this movie. Let's try to make a great movie, blah, blah, blah. And there's a couple of good sequences where Philip Seymour Hoffman and Paul Thomas Anderson are just goofing off on set. And Paul, you can find it on, just look up Magnolia blooper, and you'll find Paul Thomas Anderson's making fun of Philip Seymour Hoffman's acting, where he goes, this is what Phil would do. This is in this scene. I go, Phil, you have to go over there and touch that box, right? That's all you have to do. And this is how Phil would do it. And then he just gets up and just goes like that. He starts like falling around and stuff, and just meddling with stuff. And Philip Seymour Hoffman has like the funniest laugh I've ever heard, where it's that like like you just feel that what do you call it? That raspiness in the lungs.
Yeah,
it's so
yeah.
good. And that's fun. That's a fun clip to see.
Yeah, that kind of stuff is always good.
Yeah.
Especially on a thing like that with Tom Cruise, Philip Seymour Hoffman,
Yes.
John C. Riley.
Uh-huh.
It's just a crazy cast.
And Tom Cruise is the only cast member who doesn't appear in the documentary,
Why?
which is interesting. I don't know. Maybe because he was like, I'm not doing it. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know what was his deal.
Was he method acting?
Maybe. It's funny how he turned into like, because his career kind of went down during the whole, like when he was like promoting Scientology, and then he just became I love making movies forever. I'm never going to stop. And everybody loves him again. I like Tom Cruise.
Mm-hmm. But do you want to break down a little bit about, or what Magnolia is about?
Do we have an extra 2 hours?
No, I mean, the short version, I guess. Well, you can't give a short version. It's harder to give a short version, but
It's basically, Magnolia is inspired by movies like Nashville and Shortcuts, where it follows all these characters. And what you have in this movie are, I guess, 9 storylines. 2 of them involve a father who has cancer. 2 of them involve child prodigies. I mean, if you're this far into the podcast, you know what Magnolia is, I guess.
yeah.
But it's basically just following all these people in the San Fernando Valley, and coincidence and all these connections drive them together and stuff.
And one of the overarching themes that I notice are how the characters are coming to grips with either things that they've done wrong, or admitting to their wrongs,
Right.
or not admitting to their wrongdoings, and some of there's biblical references in there with the frogs falling from the skies and everything.
You want to hear a funny anecdote about the frogs?
Yeah.
Paul Thomas Anderson was reading a lot of this guy Charles Fort, and that guy's writing was based. I think he was like late 1800s, early 1900s, and his writing was all about this weird, peculiar, supernatural stuff that would happen. Like a farmer would go outside in the morning, and there's just frogs everywhere. Like, where did they come from? And he talked about UFOs and just these weird paranormal things, and that was what partly inspired Paul Thomas Anderson. So he read about the raining frogs and then put that in the movie, and then he went to go cast Henry Gibson, who was in Nashville. He's the guy in Nashville that goes 200 years. He's the Thurston whatever.
Keep it going.
Yeah, in this movie, he's Thurston whatever. He's the gay guy who William H. Macy's competing with for the bartender.
Yeah.
And so he goes to his house and he reads the script and he goes, "I like that you put the Bible or whatever, Exodus," and he's like, "Yes, I did put the Bible," because he didn't know that was in the Bible.
He didn't know that was like a biblical thing.
No, but then afterwards he learned that it was like Exodus 8:2, and that's you could find 8:2 like hundreds of times in the movie.
Mm-hmm.
When the guy's jumping off the building in the beginning, you can see there's wires that make an 8:2. There's like a street sign, there's a gas station sign that says 8:2. You can see 8:2 in the sign. One of the signs that Paul Thomas Anderson plays a PA who takes the sign away during the game show sequence that says Exodus 8:2 on it. So
dang, it's like some Pixar theory kind of stuff.
yeah, so I guess like that's like the most Kubrick-esque thing in that movie, probably putting some weird like coding in the background.
Yeah. I mean,
foreshadowing.
Yeah, I mean it has a lot. With that, you know, the talk show host who at the end we find out had probably sexually abused.
Yes, maybe molested his daughter.
Her daughter, his daughter most likely. He won't accept it, or he won't say it. Yeah. He just won't say it to the wife, and he goes to shoot himself, and the frog falls through and causes him to shoot an electrical thing, causing a fire. Right. And it's sort of an analogy for hell. He's trying to take himself out in a different way, but instead he gets burned. Right. And he won't. I feel like that's pointing towards the fact that he won't accept what he did or even admit his wrongdoings. Right. And it sends him.
Yeah, it forces him to reckon with the consequences, because you don't know if he in that sequence the fire starts.
Yeah.
But you're not sure if it burns the whole house down or something like that. So I think that's there's some sort of ambiguity there, unless there's a cut scene. But that's the last time we see his character. So I think the defining thing of what that scene's saying is basically like, nuh-uh, you can't take the easy way out. The whole movie is basically people dealing with this reckoning. It's like a reckoning of their karma for bad or good, you know. And Magnolia, are we at the point where we're going to talk about what we think about it? Are we doing that?
Yeah, we can.
All right.
Yeah, sure.
So Magnolia, to me, I've seen it like 4 or 5 times. Every time I watch it, the first time I watched it, I was like, this is great. Second time I watched it, it's not that good. Third time I watched it, no, this is a giant mess, but it's great. It's just this emotional, great mess. This time around I watched it, I go, it's good. I keep growing in and out of it. It's very, very strange to me.
Why do you think that is?
I think because it's sort of, since the movie is so emotionally based, not just, obviously a movie is supposed to be an emotional experience, ideally. Sometimes there are intellectually stimulating ones, which is fine. But I think since we talked about how he wrote this from the gut, and I think that's why sometimes it could feel a little hit or miss or first drafty or unpolished. And Adam Naiman, who's a critic who wrote that orange book behind you, he talked about how Magnolia was a movie made without a delete button, which makes sense because Anderson said the movie started out as a small thing and then he just kept adding and adding and adding to it. And it's almost like he had something, and then in order to make it work, he couldn't change it or cut stuff out and put things in differently. The only way he can make this work is if he adds something over here, which is why the movie is so filled and seems to be about everything thematically. There's not one thing that's thematically about. It seems tied together by so many ideas, but one of the side effects of that is there's so many ideas going on, but the geography of the movie is so big that I'm not sure how those ideas are supposed to. Those ideas feel so far apart from each other on opposite ends of the movie sometimes, and they don't. It's ironic that they don't. I don't feel like they fully come together. I can give you an example of something that should have been deleted more that wasn't deleted. He only pressed the delete button once. That I know. What?
The singing?
No, I will get to that.
That was weird. That was out of nowhere for me.
I'm about to go on a tangent. I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
So look, he's getting all ready. He just turned in. He just turned in and put the seatbelt on. So, okay. There's a sequence. There's a subplot that I think there's remnants of a subplot that I think should have been fully deleted. They're partly deleted. I don't know why he didn't. Because he only had 6 months to edit the movie. Mm-hmm. So maybe that's why the edit feels unfinished or it feels first drafty. I don't think. But anyway, I'm getting off track. there's the character Dixon, the young black kid that Jim runs into after he finds the dead body in that woman Marcy's house. That kid comes up to him, and it's like the most, I guess, cryptic or enigmatic scene where the kid, he's like, I know who did it. Like, let's work together. And he's like, shut up, little man. You don't know what you're talking about. And the kid sings this rap about, something about, that's when shit starts raining, like foreshadowing the rain of the frogs. He goes, I just told you who did it. And I've seen the movie 4 times, and I'm not sure exactly what, I guess it's a foreshadow, but I'm not sure. I don't know exactly the geography of the ideas behind that.
When that came around the first time, I watched it again because I was like thinking maybe I just didn't pay attention well enough to what he said, but I couldn't get any meaning out of it. That was just me, though.
But I don't think it's our fault, because I think that might be the result of some stuff that was cut out. Because the next time we see him, there's a scene like an hour into the movie where everybody's connected by these whip pans. And so now the camera itself is connecting all these characters together, not only their situations but the actual visuals. But Dixon, the kid, the little black kid, his name is Dixon, he's in those whip pans, and that suggests that he's on equal footing presence-wise as any other character in this movie, which doesn't feel like the case. There's a shot of him, it whip pans to like what looks like a boys' home, and they're watching What Do Kids Know on the television. And then this guy walks in, and then Dixon looks up, and this guy has a very ominous presence, and he grabs him by the shirt and then pulls him away. And then the next time we see either of those characters is the scene where I think the mistake most blatantly occurs, is when Jim sees the guy running. He sees the ominous man walking down the street, and then he runs, and he goes, okay. He turns around and chases the guy, and then Jim falls down this weird patch of vegetation, and he loses his gun, and he starts searching for it, and then we see a shot of Dixon picking up the gun and grabbing it, and then the ominous man running away. And that's where I think the mistake is not cutting out that shot of Dixon taking the gun, because then the next time we see Dixon is when he runs into Julianne Moore's character. I think her name was Linda. She's in the car unconscious, and he goes, hey, lady. And then he calls the ambulance for her, but also takes her wallet. But there's no mention or suggestion of who was in possession of the gun. In the That Moment documentary, there's a deleted scene where the ominous man and Dixon meet, and they're talking to somebody in a diner. Dixon runs in and pulls up the gun like this, and the ominous man takes it away, right? We can't use that for interpretation because it's out of the movie.
Yeah.
So now, and then at the end, the rain of frogs occurs, and then Jim saves Donnie. And then in the next morning, as almost like an afterbirth of all the frogs falling out of the sky, the gun lands right in front of Officer Jim, and he sees it. And I'm like, wait a minute, that doesn't make sense, because the whole idea of what the rain of frogs kind of represented was Paul Thomas Anderson said when he started researching the word Magnolia, the word Magonia came up. And the Magonia is basically, like I guess biblically, is a place above the firmament where stuff disappears to only to fall out of the sky years later. There's a book called Passport to Magonia that I read by Jacques Vallée. He's like a ufologist, in quotes. That's what they call themselves. It's a very interesting book. It's not concerned with the physical reality of UFOs. It basically makes the observation that UFOs, the modern myth around or lore around UFOs, is very consistent with ancient folklore or medieval folklore, and that aliens are just the sci-fi filter we've placed over it. It's a very interesting book. You should go read it. But so it's where stuff in that book, he talks about how there's legends of people being kidnapped by these beings with craft, and then they go up to the Magonia, and then they come back and be delivered back like years later. That's the same idea. It's a very ethereal, supernatural, paranormal thing, right? But what I think having Dixon pick up the gun does is take out the mystery of Officer Jim's gun disappearing. If we just saw it disappear, that would set it up for a more ethereal feeling, because there's no way they could not find it. Where did it go? And then when we see it fall out of the sky, it makes sense, because the movie has this lining of a paranormal, supernatural thing. And I don't think that's consistent. I think that the two, Dixon picking up the gun and falling out of the sky, are two things that don't fit together.
Unless, obviously there was stuff cut out.
Yes.
And that makes me believe that what was cut out is that this is now basing it off of the deleted scene.
Yeah.
That guy took the gun, threw it in the water.
Yeah.
That's how
that's what I thought. Like something out of Sydney where he throws it in the grate, the sewer grate. I was like, maybe that happens.
And it ends up in the water, which then is how the real version of the frog storms happen, the water gets sucked up, and
Yeah, maybe, I don't know.
yeah, who knows? We can't use that as an interpretation.
Yeah.
So it's kind of just
You know what it feels like though, that whole Dixon subplot? Because I do think, because when we first see Dixon, it's a black kid with a police officer, and I think that was setting itself up to be like, because this movie's about everything, right, except the race. And I think if whatever was cut out probably would have had like a racial angle. But doesn't that, to me, that partially deleted thing, I think feels like cut content from a video game. Like you see, like if you're playing Red Dead 2 and you see this house that's super detailed and it's like in this very prominent spot, and then you're like, oh, I can't go in here. What is this? And then you find out it's cut content. That's what it feels like.
Yeah.
I think the shot of Dixon taking the gun and then the shot of the whip pan to him in the boys' home, I think that should have been cut out.
Yeah.
Sorry if I spent too long on that.
No, it makes sense though. Well, like as a whole, it doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
But I think if the gun just disappeared, maybe he just left it in to show that the gun didn't just disappear. That's the only reason.
Yeah. I don't know. That's what I would ask him, why he kept that in if I ever run into him. But do you want to talk about the singing, the Wise Up scene?
Yeah.
I think that scene would work so much better. It's actually the opposite critique I have of the Dixon thing, where the Dixon thing, I'm like, this should have felt more ethereal and mysterious. Whereas the Wise Up scene feels like too supernatural and too much like an unreality. Is all you would have to do in that scene. And Paul Thomas Anderson made this connection to that sequence. Is he goes that sequence is inspired by, maybe if you hear a song on the radio and you're singing it, there's a good chance that other people are singing it too. Which makes me think, why didn't he just have that song playing on TV or the radio and they all just be happening to sing it? Not only does that go in line with the theme of the movie about these tales of extreme coincidence. It's just by chance that they all happen to be singing the song at the same time at a certain point in their character arc. But now that there's no reason for them to sing, it's almost like it's suspending our disbelief. It's asking us to suspend our disbelief too much. So they all just start singing the song out of nowhere. I think that's where I agree. I think what do you think about that scene?
It came out of, for me watching it just came out of left field. Because maybe if it was a TV program where she was doing a live performance of the song and everybody's tuned in, that would make more sense. But the first person who starts singing is what's her name? She does all the coke.
Melora Waters' character. I forget her name.
Yeah, she's the first one who sings. We already know that she listens to vinyl records based off of the early interaction with John C. Reilly's character, who comes in and says, "Oh, you got to turn your records down," and I keep it at 3. So she's listening to it on a record. Someone else is listening to it in a car.
Exactly. Yes.
So in my mind, I was wondering how it was happening, I guess. And
so we're kind of on the same page. It needed a real world catalyst for that to happen, rather than
for
just
me,
occurring out of nowhere.
In my personal opinion, that's about it.
Yeah, but my personal opinion is also objectively correct, which also makes you correct.
Yes. Hell yes. All right.
I have a complicated relationship with Magnolia because, like I said, a lot of it is hit or miss, and I think the movie's too aware of how sad it is. A lot of it feels like, oh, look how sad this is. But I think Magnolia feels like an athlete with all the natural talent in the world, but sometimes he just can't get his shit together. Where it's like, oh, how did he do? Like, how did he do in the first 30 minutes? Oh, he did great. He had 7 home runs. That opening sequence was fantastic. Well, how did he do at the Wise Up scene when they all sing? It's like he kind of got full of himself a little bit. I don't know. I'm not saying Paul Thomas Anderson got a little full of himself. But however, Paul Thomas Anderson has retroactively said, I cut like 20 minutes out of that thing for sure.
Yeah.
And he goes, I had way too much confidence. And I think, but I kind of like it as this weird, intensely emotional, non-intellectual thing. I'm not saying it's not intellectual to dismiss it. I'm saying it's very gut-oriented rather than brain-oriented, if that makes any sense.
I think one thing that is different about this, though, is at points how empty the world seems rather than lively in his other films. You know, there's scenes where the cop is driving and there's nobody on the road except the one guy running. You know, that's one of the things that stood out to me is how unlively and almost dreamlike some sequences seemed. To me, at least.
That's interesting. It's almost like a precursor to the oil embargo sequence in Licorice Pizza. There's just nobody on the streets. It's a good. I never noticed that, but now that I think about it. Also, there's like nobody on the street when the only people on the street that we see during the Reign of Frogs is Jim, Melora Waters' mom, and the ambulance carrying Linda.
It seems oddly empty at points, which stood out to me after the first watch. Because every other thing he does usually has the characters that stand out in the background, and this one is sort of missing that, maybe not missing, or just intentionally that way.
Yeah, we have to talk about Tom Cruise's performance.
Excellent, amazing.
Oh my God,
perfect.
It's funny because he played such like a repressed and almost cuckolded character in Eyes Wide Shut for 18 months straight, that in this he was finally like, God damn it, finally I can just let loose. And he's like the craziest man of all time. And it's excellent. He's absolutely fantastic.
If those dogs get near me, I will drop kick.
I will drop kick. Or even when he gets in his underwear with the reporter lady, and he just does a backflip and he's like, whew, any woman, oh my God, just one glance. That's all it takes. Like, this is the greatest thing that anybody's. Did you see the Glass Onion, the second Knives Out?
Yeah.
Remember when they're flashing back to Ed Norton's character,
and
he's dressed like Tom Cruise in Magnolia? Yeah, excellent.
It's so good.
Nothing to do with this movie, but still,
it's so good. I mean, how much of a jerk he is, but at the same time, as he's being a jerk, you already get a sense that there's a reason for this.
Oh yeah,
you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, exactly.
He's not just actually that way. He's traumatized.
Yes,
and it's made him that way.
Oh my! And the way he cries, dude, is the best. Not only like it's Tom Cruise, right? So he's extreme in everything. But when he has a crying scene, he cries harder than anybody's ever cried in a movie.
Yeah,
just like hold my mic. Just the way he's not crying like he's blubbering and stuff. He's just going. It's just like the most tense movements. And he claps. Mm-hmm. Oh my God, it's hard. Oh my, so amazing.
Yeah,
I love it so much.
He's crying as if he's wanted to really say that for so long.
Yeah, and he's trying to repress it so much.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my God,
all that repressed energy just coming out of him.
He clenches his jaw and he goes, "I am quietly judging you." To the lady. He just buys out his time. He goes, "Fuck you, bitch." Also, there's a scene
that was epic too.
When he stands up, and on one side you have his privates area, and then you have her face. He does a similar shot like that in Hard Eight, Paul Thomas Anderson, where Clementine goes, "Do you want to have sex with me, Sydney?" When they get into the room, and Sydney is standing up, and all you see is Sydney's lower. Like, you just see him from the chest down. Same shot he uses in Magnolia.
But with that character brings forth one of the other themes that I thought was important to bring up is how the parenting plays a part in how people grow up. Mm. Obviously, he was subject to a crappy father.
Oh, for a second I thought you said. I thought you meant Paul Thomas Anderson.
Not Paul Thomas.
Yeah. Frank T.J. Mackey.
Yeah. He was subject to a crappy father. He grew up, and a lot of that negative energy, which we learn later, comes from his father cheating on his mom, and leaving at a really crucial part of their lives, turned him into a sort of a monster, sort of like Andrew Tate kind of character.
I think he's more likable than Andrew Tate, though.
I don't know. Well, yeah. I mean, Andrew Tate's.
He's Tom Cruise, so of course he's more.
Yeah. You're thinking of it. I meant his character, though.
Are you saying you like Andrew Tate, Danny? I think that's what you said.
We're not getting into this.
I think you said you're a big fan of him, and then you stand by anything he's ever said.
Never.
Yeah, I see what you mean, though, because the parent-children relationship between Frank T.J. Mackey and Earl Partridge and how that messed him up is also prevalent in, was it Stanley? Stanley Spector, the actor's name? The kid, the little quiz kid.
His name's Stanley.
Stanley. And then it's Donnie Smith. His parents took his money. Jamie Gator and his daughter, Claudia. That's her name, Claudia. And who else? Name the other characters. Tom Cruise, Julianne Moore. Phil, not really. So, yeah, I guess those characters are all... It's just showing the product of how raising their parents affected them, which makes sense if this movie... Because Paul Thomas Anderson has been asked, like, what's this movie about? And years later, and he says, my dad. It's about my dad.
Mm-hmm. So did he have a good relationship with his dad or no?
Yeah. But it's not... I mean, just because it's about his dad doesn't mean his dad... did what Jimmy Gator did to his daughter to him. Like it's basically just this raw emotional movie that the genesis of that emotion comes from losing his dad. It
might have been a knee-jerk reaction to him thinking like, oh, thank God I had him, because there's people who don't have a good father figure or parental figure in their life, and it seems like a common thing that doesn't lead to good things for those people.
And both dads in the movie have cancer and they're going to die, just like his dad.
Mm-hmm. And it's a mirrored thing too with the Quiz Kid. He loses all his money. His parents take it. His parents are. We never see them, but we know from the context that they're pretty poor people, pretty bad people. And we see Stanley kind of dodge that bullet.
The worst dad ever. The dad infuriates me, dude. Stanley's dad.
Yeah.
When he's like, let's make some goddamn money.
Everybody in that whole production pisses me off. When she won't let him go. She won't let him go. To
the bathroom.
And then the producers goes, what's wrong with him? She's like, I don't know. It's like
she pretends like it wasn't her fault.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That whole thing is a whole nother story with Magnolia too. He kind of points out the oddity of that whole portion of television.
Yeah, and he also
child
grew,
prodigy kind of thing.
Yeah, and he also grew up, or like we said before, he grew up around that environment in television. And I think a good thing to end on about Magnolia is, I said before, it's this giant emotional thing. And I think sometimes movies operate best when they make you react to something that you don't have the words for. For example, when basically it's this, ready? When you're watching a movie and you go, oh, and I don't know what that means. There's the scene when the frogs start raining and they hit Donnie in the face and then he breaks his teeth. Right? Obviously, there's the irony is that his teeth are perfect, but he wanted to get braces to impress Brad. And then there's an irony in him breaking his teeth. I don't know what that idea means, but I go, oh, that's good. Or the raining of the frogs is basically the whole raining of the frogs. When you watch that for the first time, you don't know what it means, but you're watching this thing occurring, going, oh, this supersedes language for me, you know. And I guess again, going back to, I'm sorry if we're getting a little repetitive, but Paul Thomas Anderson later said, you know, hearing a doctor tell me that my dad was going to die of cancer was basically, I remember thinking when he told me that, you're telling me that frogs are falling from the sky.
On January 7th, 2000, Magnolia was released nationwide in the U.S. Critical reception was mixed to positive. For example, Janet Maslin at the New York Times said in her review, "It's astonishing to see a film begin this brilliantly, only to torpedo itself in its final hour."
Yeah, and I get that because we talked about the two sequences that are kind of giant swings that may or may not have paid off. That would be the wise up scene and then the frogs falling from the sky. What do we got? What else we got?
Magnolia was nominated for 3 Oscars: Best Supporting Actor for Tom Cruise, Best Original Song for Amy Mann, and Best Original Screenplay for Anderson.
Yeah, I guess I maybe people were expecting it to be, I'm just assuming here, but maybe people are expecting it to be like a big awards contender that maybe gets like between 5 and 10 nominations, let's say. I don't think a barometer for how good a movie is, though, is the Oscar nominations. I guess from a business standpoint, short term it is. But long term, I think Magnolia is still maybe not one of the greatest movies of all time, but definitely a movie that has a lot of discourse around it and has stayed in the conversation for film in the film community for a while.
Mm-hmm.
And also the budget was 37 million, and I think it made like 48 million, which isn't. I don't think it's theatrically profitable because it would need something maybe closer to like 70 or 80 to be or maybe even 50 or 60 to be profitable at that time. But ancillary markets like home video and stuff like that, TV, cable runs, it probably has made money back since then. Definitely.
I would imagine. It has that rewatchability as almost like a Kubrick film does.
Yeah, yes. I was talking about this today with people in my right group. They keep saying, they said, I don't know if I like Paul Thomas Anderson because every time I watch it, I'm not sure how I feel and I want to watch it again. I'm like, that's the point.
Mm-hmm.
It's supposed, and especially when we get to things like The Master or Inherent Vice, especially is like Inherent Vice is like that Infinite Jest book that I talked about, the David Foster Wallace book.
Punch Drunk Love, 2002. Anderson expressed that he wanted to get away from all the sadness and cancer of Magnolia and wanted to make something fun. Inspired by the comedies of Adam Sandler, Anderson met with him about making a movie together.
There were 3 Adam Sandler movies that he was a big fan of. There was Happy Gilmore, I think Little Nicky was first, and then Big Daddy, or Big Daddy was before Little Nicky. And those movies, he said he would see a glint in Adam Sandler's eyes when he would get really, really angry, and that you could not see the whites of his eyes, and it didn't feel like he was acting. And he said he saw something in Sandler. People thought he was joking. Like after Magnolia, people said, "Who would you like to work with again?" And he said Adam Sandler and Daniel Day-Lewis, and everybody thought he was joking. But no, he was dead serious, and those are the 2 actors he worked with in his next preceding movies. And there is probably the funniest clip, one of the funniest clips I've ever seen, where I don't know if it's during production, but it might be during pre-production, because I know he hung out with Sandler for a while before they started making the movie. And they're in a car, and Sandler keeps calling him PTA. I'm here with PTA. I got my licorice, and they're eating. They're both high as shit. Mm-hmm. And he goes, "I got my licorice. PTA, what do you got?" And Paul Thomas Anderson goes, "Gummy bears."
Little kid high.
One of the greatest filmmakers of the 21st century, just going, "Gummy bears." It's the funniest thing to me.
How can he be so organized yet so like little kid high at the same time?
So I'm glad we were able to put that in the podcast. That's one of the funniest things.
Gummy bears.
And I think the genesis for the idea of Punch Drunk Love as a whole happened when he met Maya Rudolph, because the movie is about falling in love. Mm-hmm. And retroactively he said, it's about love, man. Nothing. It's not about anything more than that. And he did a sketch for SNL. I think it was called like Hercules, or maybe I tried to find it. I couldn't find it. It's you could definitely find on was it Peacock? SNL's on. I'm sure if you look up the episode in his IMDb, you can watch it. And so he did a sketch. He directed a sketch for SNL, and then he said he read a name of somebody who was about to be on the show, and he saw the name Maya Rudolph. And to his recollection, he said, "I saw that name Maya Rudolph, and I just had this weird feeling like I knew this name was going to be important to me somehow." And I still hung around there, and I met her a few times. And then I went to London to work on something, and I was just like, "No, I want to go back." And he went back to New York to ask her out. And then they were together. It says they married in 2002, where they started to get together in 2002, which is around when Punch Drunk Love came out. So that's very interesting. So I think it's possible that that's why he made Punch Drunk Love, because that's when he met Maya Rudolph.
That would make sense, as a lot of the other themes of his movies have something to do with something from his real life.
Yes, that's a good point.
You know, Boogie Nights, his porn obsession / growing up in the porn industry, Magnolia, his father, and this, his love for Maya Rudolph.
Yeah.
Wow.
And also he said sort of the chicken soup to just being all depressed because he was making Magnolia. It's a very depressing movie. Mm-hmm. Was that he would watch movies like by Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers, which had a big influence on this movie. And those were just very happy, and they were only 90 minutes, and they weren't these long, dark movies. And he would gravitate to movies like that, movies like Adam Sandler's movies.
So where the scripts for Boogie Nights and Magnolia were 152, and 194 pages. The script for Punch Drunk Love was only 95 pages. Production got underway in February 2001.
I thought it was on the Charlie Rose interview, but I rewatched it. I didn't hear them talk about it. I heard that they started filming for 2 weeks and then stopped because they didn't have a flow going on. I'm not sure what it was. I'm pretty sure that's true. And then eventually they got back and got started again. One of the things that Sandler talked about that we didn't talk about when we were talking about them getting together was Anderson goes, I want you to be in my next movie. And then Sandler goes, okay. And he went and saw Magnolia. And he goes, you want me to do that?
Yeah, he was not.
Anyway.
He didn't feel he was capable.
He didn't feel like he was capable of doing a dramatic role like that.
Mm-hmm.
But obviously Punch Drunk Love is a very, what would you call it? Very funky movie.
Yeah.
And Paul Thomas Anderson described it as like the art house Adam Sandler movie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is totally different from most of the characters that he's played. So the Mattress Man commercial, where does this come up?
So I saw this on YouTube, and I had no idea how they filmed it or what it was for. It's Philip Seymour Hoffman doing like a commercial for his character, Doug Tremble, and Dean Trumbull. And he's on top of the roof to the play, or no, he's on top of a bus or something, and he has a guitar. He goes, "Hey, this is Dean Trumbull, the Mattress Man. We got $75 for a mattress, and only this for $2.99." And then he jumps off and like lands on mattresses on top of a car, but he doesn't hit it properly, and he falls right onto the pavement. And I'm like, they got Philip Seymour Hoffman to do, surely I think that was scripted. And they got Philip Seymour Hoffman to do that stunt. That is insane. Me and my dad are rewatching it to like see if the pavement is cushioned, and it doesn't look like it, but apparently it is cushioned, which is how they did the stunt. Because there's an actual commercial you could find of a Mattress Man doing the exact same thing, where he goes, "Hey, $2.99," and they basically recreated the commercial beat by beat, line by line. Yeah, I was worried about that goddamn thing. He falls off, and it's hilarious. Please go watch. Just look up Mattress Man commercial.
In the link. Put it.
No,
in
we're
the
not
link.
linking it. I'm not plugging it.
All
They have to pay me. That video has to pay me.
Okay, all right. Fuck you guys then.
Oh man.
Cut that out.
Yep. I'm cutting out everything you say this episode, pal.
Yeah, this is bad. I'm fucking it up.
What?
No, I'm joking.
Comment down below if you think Danny's messing it up, and also be extra mean about it.
Punch Drunk Love was released nationwide on November 1st, 2002. Critics praised it, but audience gave the movie a terrible D+ on Cinema Score.
We talked about how Eyes Wide Shut got it like a D- on Cinema Score. Anything below, like anything around a C below, is pretty disastrous. If your movie gets a C, it depends what kind of movie you are. But if you're a big budget movie and you get a C, that's almost unheard of. That's crazy bad. And this movie, it was only $25 million budget, but Adam Sandler at that time was very strong in the box office. And so it made $24 million worldwide off of a $25 million budget. And so if you go, that's definitely a theatrical loss. I don't know if that's enough to eventually make a profit, you know, and ancillary markets. I don't know how many DVDs they'd have to sell to be profitable. But I understand why audiences it didn't sit well with audiences, because I've seen the movie 6 times. I've probably seen that movie more than any other Paul Thomas Anderson movie.
Oh, really?
I've seen that movie like 6 times. And the first time I watched it, I had a really bad fever. And every time I watch the movie, I feel that fever.
Yeah.
But also, it was just me I just didn't understand the point of it. Like, it didn't sit right with me. I couldn't find the frequency on the radio that this movie was operating at. But this time, doing this, like watching the movie and then writing a bunch of notes on it, really helps me understand the movie. And I think I appreciated them, because I watched this a few months ago only, and I still don't get it. This time, writing down my thoughts have really helped me appreciate it. And the conclusion or realization I've come to is, if you treat this movie like you're watching the Courage the Cowardly Dog show, it makes a whole lot more sense. because the premise of the Courage the Cowardly Dog show when you're a kid is, there's this dog and he exists. He has to protect his owners from this hellish, encroaching world where all these monsters are trying to get at his owners and stuff like that. And then as you get older, you realize, no, that's just how he perceives the world. So for Courage the Cowardly Dog, a mailman becomes a flying spaghetti monster. And what we're watching with Barry is the world is so chaotic around him, and all the beats you'd have in a traditional narrative are there, sort of, but they're all scrambled and shifted around and out of order. So, for example, there's a scene where Barry gets punched, and he says "ow" before he gets punched. Like the reaction is before the action, because everything in the movie is being all scrambled up. And that first 20 minutes is so chaotic because that's just how he interprets the world. His socially anxious, the world doesn't make any sense to him. And then when he finds that harmonium, that's what really starts to get him in tune. Paul Thomas Anderson talked about how this movie's about getting in tune. And the only times where we see him do that is when he has that harmonium, and the appearance of that harmonium is sort of linked to the appearance of Lena. And the first time, the same way a mailman turns into a flying spaghetti monster for Courage, him getting, abducted by those 4 blonde brothers is portrayed like a UFO abduction. If you rewatch that scene, it's like he's getting abducted by aliens. There's that light that stays there, and then that zooms away, and there's this weird UFO noise and stuff. And the world doesn't make any sense. Like, chairs break down weirdly. There's a scene where he's looking at the cans for the coupons, and he's gliding, like he's getting pulled, like he's not walking.
Yeah, I love that shot.
And then you could hear the footsteps. So not everything's coming together. And then, but the first time you see the movie perform a scene in a traditionally dramatic way is when he kisses Lena for the first time.
Yeah.
The camera pushes in, their choreography is perfect, and the music kicks in, and all those 3 things are working in perfect harmony for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's what makes me finally get the movie.
And even right before that, when they kiss, is such an anxiety-inducing experience.
But it's funny too.
When he's running around and he just can't remember where her room is.
Yeah, and he keeps going back.
That seems like a bad dream sequence. Like, you're just, I could imagine
like
myself being in a dream, just not knowing where to go.
Yeah,
knowing
the
that
whole
there's
time.
someone waiting for a kiss.
Exactly. It's like those dreams where you're getting dressed the whole dream.
Yeah.
It's so annoying.
Or you show up to school and you're not dressed, and you realize,
dang, you must be insecure as shit, because I'd never had that dream.
Shut up. No, there is so many instances of just feeling anxious. He's trying to finally talk to Lena, and everything in the shop is just going to shit. They crash and knock over all the stuff. Yeah. That scene gives me so many.
Hey fellas, you all right? Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. He just kind of knocks on the. He just wants to focus on her. He finally has something. He has a few things that he really wants to focus on, but everything else is blocking him from doing that. Even the. I felt so anxious when he walks into his family for the first time, and he walks in and walks back out, and you're just thinking, why doesn't he just walk in? And then he walks in, and the first few lines are all like, "Are you gay? Or what's wrong with you?"
Gable?
Yeah,
You're like, God damn it! The worst possible thing to say to him.
Yeah, someone who's just feeling so anxious, and he just walks in. And they're like, "Remember when we used to call you gay boy?"
Yeah, and then he breaks the window, and they call him the R word.
Yeah.
And that you could just tell there's a whole lifetime of.
Yeah,
that's why he was so domineered by these very invasive sisters. All of the sisters call him, and they're like, "What are you doing? What's going on? Why don't you like her? Well, what's going on? Are you going to come? Why are you wearing that suit?" They're all, it's like it's impossible for him to live.
Yeah, all that stuff. It made total sense. Everything that happened before that, once he shows up to the party, it makes a lot more sense why he's acting so strange.
Where does this land in your ranking of what tier of Paul Thomas Anderson movie does it? What was your enjoyment of this?
Oh, I really did enjoy this movie a lot. There's so many shots where you look at it and that is Paul Thomas Anderson. The first shot, he's in blue, the blue line on the wall. Yeah. He's high. He's
all
hidden
cornered
in that.
up.
Yeah. In terms of enjoyment, I had just watched all of his other movies that were 3 hours. So it was a nice break to go to a 90-minute movie. And
that's probably why I've seen it the most times, 'cause it's only 90 minutes.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
You're in and out.
So,
and even if I still didn't understand the movie the 6th time, I still think it's worth the watch just because it is very, very funny.
Yeah.
The scene, like the scenes where he's in Hawaii and he's asking for Lena's number, and he's at the phone booth, and his sister is like, "Why do you want her number?" He's like, "Just give me the fucking number. You can't treat me. I'll fucking kill you. Give me the fucking number." I'm like, that's so funny.
Can you just fucking help me out?
Yeah.
God damn it.
When
he's running away after he gets punched, and he's like, it's so strange.
It's crazy.
Like, why?
Or even when after he says bye-bye to Lena and he doesn't kiss her, he goes, "Bye-bye, you stupid motherfucker."
Bye. Well, bye-bye.
Yeah. I don't know if it's underrated, but I think Punch Drunk Love is one that people should give more of a chance. I know there's a lot of people who love it, and I didn't know why. But now I feel like I'm one of those people.
I want to hear your thoughts about the shot when he shows up and goes in for the handshake.
Oh, in
she
Hawaii?
just kisses him. Yeah. And then it goes to the wide shot. All the people walking by, beautiful ocean in the background, water, and they're just kissing. I think that's one of the most beautiful shots I've ever seen.
Yeah. And I do like how it highlights every social interaction he has is still awkward. Like there's an awkwardness in the way he goes to for the handshake, or even when he goes to Hawaii, and even getting on a plane for him is awkward. They find a way to make it awkward where the hall that he has to go down is a little bit too long, and he sees the flight attendants at the end of the hall, and he has his ticket, and he's going, and he does that little jog. He can't just walk up, like he has to do a thing. That's very good. But that shot's worthy of the poster. It's the whole movie. You know, I'm not as well versed in picking apart that shot and saying, well, they're silhouetted because of this philosophy thing. You know, that's a great shot. A great scene. I like how they
people walking by.
When they walk by, when they start kissing, and then they all go. Again, that's like the way people walk in the background in Paul Thomas Anderson's movies is such a particular style. I don't know how he tells them, how he communicates that to a bunch of people to walk a certain way, or maybe it's just the way he frames it. But even the way Lena kind of hooks around that garden where he sees her for the first time, in that scene where he's waiting and he sees her out the door, and she kind of does this curve around, and he cuts, and she comes around, and then he cuts closer, and then cuts back to her revealing herself again. That was really good too.
Mm-hmm. That whole Hawaii sequence makes me want to go to Hawaii so bad.
Or the scene after that when they kiss, when they're in the hotel room, and he's like, "Your face is so pretty, I want to smash it."
Yeah. That was that's could be taken. For me, at first I was thinking, boy, this guy's got problems. But at the same time, to find someone that he could feel comfortable to even say that to is a big step for him. You know,
and that's why I was always like, what's the big deal about Lena? Like, is she a good character? Because I didn't know what was going on with her, but she exists basically as a catalyst for Barry to find a rhythm and a harmony in life. And I think that's enough. I think she exists as sort of like this weird entity. There's theories that she's an alien.
I mean, it could make sense, but
but
I think she's totally opposite to the sisters. She'll bring something up and he'll seem like he doesn't want to talk about it, and she won't pry about it. Yeah. She'll back off when the sisters probably
she's a normal person.
What the hell's wrong with you?
Dude, the scene when she goes, your sister's told me that you hit the screen window with a hammer. He goes, I gotta go to the bathroom. Yeah. And he goes to the bathroom and just trashes the place. It's so funny. He just rips apart and he punches all the stalls apart in one punch, but the little soap dispenser is just indestructible. And then the way he gets called up and the manager the manager goes, "Sir, I'm gonna have to ask you to leave." And he goes, "Please don't do this to me." He goes, "Sir, I'm gonna crack your fucking skull open."
Yeah.
Oh,
But
excellent.
how calm he's able to just be like, no, that wasn't me.
Yeah.
No, that wasn't me.
Yeah.
It's like, your
"No,
hand
that
is
wasn't
bleeding.
me." Yeah. Anyway,
Yeah.
that movie operates on such a. That's why I don't blame audiences for not liking it. I don't blame. It operates at such a unique frequency.
There Will Be Blood, 2007. Anderson stated that he suffered from writer's block in the years after Punch Drunk Love, until he discovered the novel Oil, written by Upton Sinclair.
Yeah, he had a script of two warring families or two fighting families, and he was kind of stuck on it and couldn't really figure it out. Also, he says he has writer's block, but it was around this time he started having kids. So it's less writer's block and more just kids block. You know?
It was an interesting way of saying you had kids.
Yeah, exactly. And he was in London doing work for something, and he said he felt homesick, and he bought Oil because it had a picture of California oil fields on it, and he was homesick. He was like, "Oh, California!" So he bought it, and then he read the first half and was like, "Wait a minute, this could really help me figure out the script." And he incorporated Oil into the script of the two fighting families that he had, and that eventually became There Will Be Blood. He doesn't his adaptation is basically the first half or the first 100 and something pages of the book, and then later, because the book chronicles Daniel Plainview's rise, and then it just talks about the transformation of Los Angeles into modern day Los Angeles. It's more of a historical thing of a city more than it is about Daniel Plainview.
Mm-hmm.
And he just adapted the first half, so it's a very loose adaptation. So almost in the vein of like Kubrick,
Yeah.
because Kubrick would just take a book and be like, "I'm gonna do whatever I want with it."
Yeah, just take it and make it his own. Okay, so the production team had trouble figuring out exactly what oil derricks looked like and how they worked.
Yeah, because it's funny because he talks about his research into silver mining and stuff like that, and he said I had to read like 5 books to figure out really it's this simple. You just go into the ground and blow stuff up. Like there wasn't any big.
He was looking for more of a.
Yeah, but he couldn't believe how simple it was. But then the oil derricks, because I have a book called Western Mining. I read some of that, and it's the way they say that everything works is just confusing because they're using all the spindle, works on the crankshaft, and then the crankshaft spin into the gimbals. And
Yeah, they talk as if you already know it.
yeah, and so the I think it was Jack Fisk was the art director on that movie, and he basically said we should just look at children's books of how to oil or how to drill for oil, just children, because they have drawings of how to do it. They have
from those times.
from children. No, well, I guess from those times, but also like modern day.
Mm-hmm.
So they just looked at a bunch of children's books to help them figure out how to build the oil derricks.
Interesting.
You never think.
Yeah, but it's also if they're having trouble figuring it out, how much of the audience is going to be like, "Hey, that oil derrick isn't right," But it's still something. Obviously, if it's central to the plot of the film,
Yeah, I'm sure they just didn't want Neil deGrasse Tyson to be like, "Hey, the stars were wrong," and they're like, "Shut up."
Yeah, that kind of shit. What did he do that
on
with?
Titanic? He tweeted about the stars being wrong, and then James Cameron was like, "Shut up!"
Yeah.
And then a few years later, they remastered it, and James Cameron was like, and he
fixed
changed it. Yeah, he changed it.
Production went underway in June 2006. Dylan Frazier was cast as H.W. Plainview. However, Frazier was not an actor and was just a kid who lived in West Texas.
Yeah, I don't know what the decision was between finding just a local kid to be in the movie rather than a trained actor child. But apparently the story goes where they contacted Dylan Frazier's mom and expressed their desire for him to be in the movie. And she goes, "Well, who's he going to be working with?" They said Daniel Day-Lewis. She goes, "Let me see one of his movies." So they showed them. She watched Gangs of New York. I don't know who recommended she watched that.
Yeah.
And of course, she's Bill the Butcher in that.
Yeah.
She's like, "I don't think I want my son to be in this." And then I think Paul found out that she watched that, and then he sent her a copy of The Age of Innocence. And she was like, "Okay, he could be in the movie." And then there was another guy originally cast as Eli Sunday.
Yeah.
It was originally Paul Dano was just the brother, Paul, who gives Daniel the tip about the oil in Little Boston. And there was another actor, I think his name was Ken O'Neill or Kel O'Neill, and he worked on the movie for like 6 weeks. They filmed for 6 weeks with this guy as Eli Sunday. And I don't know if I think it was just some people say, oh, Daniel Day-Lewis was so intense that he couldn't take it. I don't know if that's true. That might be like a sensationalized story.
Yeah.
But it's also possible that Paul Thomas Anderson just didn't think the guy was fitting the role. It could be, or it could be a mix of the two.
Mm-hmm.
But that was pretty interesting.
Mm-hmm. And I think with who ended up being Eli is perfect choice.
Yeah. It is funny. Dylan Frazier is just some normal kid who just went to elementary school in West Texas, and he's acting as Daniel Plainview's son. And if these stories of this guy being intimidated by Daniel Day-Lewis are true, then this guy was scared of Daniel Day-Lewis, and this kid's just like, yeah, whatever, who cares?
Yeah, it doesn't matter. So, okay. There Will Be Blood was released nationwide on January 25th, 2008, and was immediately praised as one of the best movies of the decade. It was also the most profitable movie of Anderson's career, grossing $76 million worldwide off a $25 million budget.
This was the first movie, I explained before, where Magnolia was maybe expected to be an awards darling. This was the first time Anderson had a movie that was an awards darling. I think it was nominated for like 8 Oscars, and it was a big contender for Best Picture. And what I think is interesting about There Will Be Blood, I've seen this probably because There Will Be Blood's the movie you watch where it's pretty accessible to mainstream audiences. It's more accessible to them than, let's say, Punch Drunk Love or Inherent Vice. But also the vibes are just so strong in it. A lot of times, especially me when I was when I was coming of age, is I was much more drawn to the vibes of a movie before I understood it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I see the shots in this and the music, and I'm totally drawn to it, and I think it's the best thing of all time. And then somebody's like, hey, what does the movie mean? I'm just like, I don't know.
Like that, yeah.
But this time around, I was especially after we did the episode on Kubrick, I was much more aware of Kubrick's influences on this movie than I have been before. Because people say it's influenced by Kubrick, and I'm like, yeah, sure it is. I didn't know how.
Mm-hmm.
But then this time around, I realized it's interesting because this is his most Kubrickian movie, if that's the word to say it. But also and it's also a lot heavily influenced by 2001, which is interesting because 2001 and There Will Be Blood are basically the complete opposite of each other, the complete inverse of each other. 2001 is like this hopeful space journey about a search for man's meaning in the stars, and There Will Be Blood is this very dark, cynical, pessimistic character study on this guy who's obsessed with getting things out of the ground.
Looking down.
Both movies open with, in the desert, in this barren land, in this primitive time, relatively primitive time in human history, with a Dawn of Man sequence, and then in the opening with Daniel, he's just in a hole with a pickaxe. And the most, let's say, I think the most Kubrickian shot of PTA's career is the very last shot of the movie at the bowling alley, where it's this very symmetrical. It almost feels like it's from The Shining. If there was a bowling alley in The Shining, it's this very symmetrical shot, and the movie ends with, obviously he kills. Spoiler alert! I don't know what you're doing here if you haven't seen the movie, but he kills Eli with the bowling pin, and then he goes, "I'm finished," and then it cuts to classical music, and it feels very reminiscent of the ending of Clockwork Orange, where the governor goes, "Hey, we should be friends, Alex." And Alex goes, "All right, we'll be friends, you Gulliver, whatever, bloody the hell."
Mm-hmm.
And then the media comes in and takes pictures, and then Alex narrates, "I was cured all right." And then it cuts to Beethoven playing.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's very, very similar.
Yeah.
What do you think about that? Think about that, huh? But you never thought of that.
No, I already was gonna say all that, but
Damn it. I believe you.
No, but the interesting thing about Daniel as a character is that he kind of doesn't complete a character arc in a sense. Like he's still just a piece of shit at the end of the day, right?
Yes.
I feel like that's one of the points of the movie is that he never really completes he does go through a character arc, but he's
somewhat
still...
Well, people that's one of the most common criticisms. Like I showed this movie to my sister and my sister-in-law, and they told me, "Yeah, I get it. He's bad." And I think people say like he's obviously he's a great character and he's well written and well acted, but he's ultimately a one-note or one-dimensional character. And I do think that criticism is partly true, but also I don't think it's that simple. I think there's some things going on where maybe he's not completely. There's some contradictions in him, and that usually contradictions in a character make for an interesting character when they're done right. And one of these contradictions is you see. Obviously, the point of the movie is he's becoming increasingly selfish and greedy and misanthropic. But the first time we see his greediness is when HW, they go to Little Boston and they find Little Boston. They realize that there's oil there. And HW goes, "Are we going to give them oil prices?" And he goes, "We'll give them quail prices." So he's already saying that he's going to scam them out of some money. But then he opens up the well, and there's a scene where HW tells him, "Hey, Mary's father hits her. That's what she told me." And he goes, "Mary's the little one?" And he goes, "Yeah." And then they open up the well, and Mary's running around playing with, I guess, HW, and Daniel grabs her, and he goes, "Hey, you like you like the oil? It's great, right? Everything's fine." And he goes, "I'll take care of you now." He goes, "Daddy doesn't hit you anymore, does he?" And he goes, "No more hitting." And then he lets her go. And I'm like, why would he care if he's this one-dimensional guy who doesn't give a shit about anybody other than himself and maybe his son at this point? Why does he care if this guy hits his daughter? And one can suggest that he's doing it because it's part of his snake oil salesman bit of being a very community-oriented guy. And I think it's an abomination that bread be looked upon as a luxury. And but if that was what he was doing in doing that, why didn't he do it in front of everybody, like a big crowd, like he did with the opening of the oil derrick? Why does he? The only people that are in that scene are Mary, Abel, her dad, and Daniel. He's not doing it for anybody. So that suggests an actual care for her well-being. And then at the end, and I think the part where the thing about him being one-dimensional, one note is kind of I agree with, is when we flash forward to 1927 and the whole thing about him being insane and his downward spiral. I think the concept of that does feel a little bit tired. But then there's that scene where he talks to HW. He goes, "You were never my son. You're an orphan."
Yeah.
And
out of a basket.
Yeah, he goes, "You were never my son, a bastard in a basket." And then the movie cuts to a shot of them back in Little Boston in 1912, let's say. And it's the first time where you can see a sort of warmth in Daniel's character, because he's smiling and his mustache and his hair, he almost looks like Charlie Chaplin. And HW goes up to him and he's playing, and Daniel's like fiddling with a hat, and he looks over and smiles at HW, and he has this very warm presence, and that scene's put in the movie to suggest, oh yeah, he was his son. He's just lying right now.
Yeah. So
it suggests a few things. Is that taking place in Daniel's head? Is he remembering his memories with HW as a son? Is that in HW's head, or is that the movie objectively juxtaposing him saying, "You were never my son," with this scene, objectively saying, "Nick, no,
you were.
You're lying." And it could either be there's still a part of Daniel that feels that way, or the tragedy is that he did feel that way at one point, but now he's completely spiraled into being a piece of shit. And that basically represents his final gesture of separation from humanity, as Daniel Day-Lewis put it.
Yeah. That's more of what I was getting at, like thinking of. Not
I know it's
obviously.
I know it sounded like you were just going, "Yeah, I pretty much was thinking."
Yeah, no.
I
didn't mean in a sense that he's one. Like when I said he didn't go through the proper story arc, I guess I meant it more in he went through it in a tragic way.
Yeah, he had a negative one.
Yeah, he didn't. Because there's parts of the film where he does feel like he's gonna be a good father to HW, and then obviously that doesn't happen. Yeah. He sends him away. He does all it has to do with the greed type of thing where he went for everything he thought he wanted with the greed, and in the end he ends up lonely and
Yeah,
a
it's
murderer.
like it's like a story. It's that classic story of a man who has everything but has nothing.
Yeah.
And I think another thing that's interesting is he has this. He talks about him finding his brother has given him like a second breath because he says that he hates people so much, and so I don't, because I think he cared. I don't know if it's genuine at the time. There's a scene where obviously he sends HW away, and then he meets with Tilford about doing a deal to sell all the oil derricks and the drills, and they go, we can make you a millionaire right here, and he goes, you can retire and spend time with your boy or whatever, and you see Daniel think, and I think at that moment, that's I would guess that takes place somewhere during the midpoint, because that's a moment where he could stop, the story can be over, and he can literally just live with HW, but he realizes no, because if I sell, I'm going to be working, everything I work towards is already done. Like it's sort of about the grind for him rather than it is the result, because he has enough money to take care of his son. It's clearly not about that anymore. So what he does is he sabotages his own chance to sell out when the guy goes, take care of your son, spend time with your boy. He goes, I'm going to come to you in the middle of the night, wherever you're sleeping, and I'm going to cut your throat. The guy goes, what? Did you just say to me? And he says this extreme thing out of nowhere. I think partly it could be, well, that's just about the thing. That's a perspective of interpretation, is that can clearly to one person say, oh, he's guilty about how he sent his son away. But also it can be, oh, he's using his son as an excuse to not take the deal and keep going and try to keep achieving this giant monopoly on the oil industry and stuff like that, which I think is interesting. And then it's only when he kills his brother, the guy who's giving him the second breath, he kills the brother, and then immediately right after that he gets the pipeline, and then he wants HW back. But that's a part, I guess that's like sort of this is just sort of a half-baked thought of how exactly does having family around relate to his existence? Because he always needs somebody around him, because he only sends HW away. He only sends HW away because he has his brother, who's allegedly. And then once he finds out he doesn't have the brother, then he gets HW back. It's just an interesting...
Mm-hmm. Well, it's also something, doesn't Daniel... as a character, he sort of uses HW in certain aspects.
Oh, yeah.
To get ahead.
Yes.
How does he use him?
Well, it's sort of ambiguous how much of it is HW being an actual son to him and how much of it is he only took HW under his wing so that he can use him in business dealings. I guess that could be it, because he wants to be a family... He wants the image of a family business. I run a family business. This is my son and my partner, HW Plainview. And then when he has his brother that still maintains the family business.
He just gets rid of HW.
Yeah. But also having a kid is a pretty good business tactic. Me and my dad used to get giant tips when I was like 10. I was like 9 or 10 working with him doing garage door stuff, and people would just give us... I had old guys hand me $100.
Nice, dude. Heck yeah.
He gave me a $20 bill.
Oh, goddamn. You!
I'd love to get you on a slow boat to China.
The Master, 2012. Anderson had the idea of a sailor coming back from World War II in his head since the early 2000s, but Anderson expanded on the idea after watching a documentary called Let There Be Light.
Yeah, I don't know exactly when he saw that documentary, but let's say somewhere between 2000 and 2012, he watched that during the writing process, and that really opened up and confirmed some of the things that he was already writing about the character that became Freddie Quell. And the documentary Let There Be Light, it's actually on the Blu-ray for The Master, which is interesting. It comes with it. Is The Master... Did I not bring that in here?
I guess not.
Oh, shit. I have the Blu-ray.
I saw it on top of by the TV.
Oh, that's right. It was in my living room. Anyway, this is important. Nobody cares about that. So, but the Let There Be Light was a documentary made by John Huston during World War II, because the War Department commissioned a bunch of prominent directors at the time to make some propaganda films for the U.S. Army. And John Huston comes back with Let There Be Light, which is following shell-shocked soldiers
Mm-hmm.
coming back from the war, and there was these the doctors would do these interviews with these guys, and these guys would be crying like, I don't know how I can go back to my wife after I've seen the thing, and they were severely damaged. There's one where this guy, he should be able to walk, but he can't. Like his brain's psyching itself out, and the doctor has to like put him under hypnosis to make him regain his ability to walk. Fascinating, and it's no when you watch it, and it's no wonder that the government took one look at it, or the War Department took one look at it, and we're like, we're going to ban this for 40 years.
Yeah,
it was banned until the 80s.
Wow.
You couldn't watch it, and yes, you should go watch that documentary if you are interested.
Uh-huh.
And Anderson rips scenes right out of that. There's scenes of the guy going, "You won't." There are people on the outside that will not understand the conditions that you men have. It'll be hard for you to assimilate. And while everybody's looking at that guy talking, those shots of the close-ups on the soldiers are right out of there will be light. Let there be light. There will be light. There will be light. And there's a shot of the guys going down the hallway, or of this stairwell, that is ripped from Let There Be Light as well.
Filming was originally slated to begin in August 2010, but the financiers, River Road, pulled out, delaying the movie indefinitely.
So I don't know who River Road is. I've never heard of them before, which is maybe sucks for them, and they should have made The Master. I don't know. But I didn't know this. Originally Jeremy Renner was casted to play Freddie Quell, which is weird in retrospect to think about. Hawkeye playing Freddie Quell. And it was Philip Seymour Hoffman as well. He was always attached. And then Reese Witherspoon was going to play his wife, Peggy. But then this woman, Megan Ellison, who had a production company, Annapurna, she was like, I think she was a daughter of a billionaire guy. So she just had a bunch of money, and she said, I'll put up the money.
So during the wrap party on The Master, the sober Philip Seymour Hoffman reportedly had a drink during the celebration. This relapse allegedly led to his death in 2014.
Yeah, I forget where I heard PTA talk about this, but he was asked, I think Bill Simmons' guy, right-hand man on the Bill Simmons podcast, asked him, what's the best thing you've ever seen an actor do? And he just said Philip Seymour Hoffman in The Master.
Yeah.
The whole thing.
Mm-hmm. He's playing basically L. Ron Hubbard, isn't he?
Yeah, so he was based off L. Ron Hubbard, and guys like, and the whole gist of Lancaster Dodd is L. Ron Hubbard, Orson Welles, guys like that. Also, do you know who the most published author of all time is?
Is it him?
It's L. Ron Hubbard. He has like thousands of books.
Oh,
or maybe hundreds. He just would write this shitty first draft in like 2 weeks and be like, publish it. Go, go, go.
Anderson reportedly showed the movie to Tom Cruise. However, what exactly Cruise thought of the movie is unclear. I would have think he would hate it because it's...
I don't know if the movie is necessary, because people, when it was coming out, people described it as the Scientology movie.
Mm-hmm.
And I think similarly to the idea of pornography and Boogie Nights, it's a little... It tends towards Scientology, or the cause, which is the representation of Scientology, as not working and not being correct, but it's not a expose on the origins of Scientology and how it's the dumbest thing ever. It's more of just an afterthought, if that makes sense. I don't know if afterthougught's the exact right word for it, but it's not the point of the movie. Is to be Scientology's bad, you know. And it's interesting because Anderson was asked, "Oh, did you show the movie to Tom Cruise?" And he said, "Yeah." And they said, "What do you think?" He said, "Well, he had a good conversation. And we're still fine." And then there was another reporter who said, "Have you showed the movie to Tom Cruise?" And he says, "Do you know the answer?" And she goes, "I do." And he goes, "Well, that's it. Then I'm not going to say it." And he was like really angry. So, and then some people say that Tom Cruise stormed out. It was like, "This is ridiculous," and then they haven't talked. But we don't know what exactly is correct.
Mm-hmm. It's hard to tell because I can't see Tom Cruise doing that. Well, I guess I could.
Well, I can see him storming out and stuff. The thing that's crazy to me is that Scientology would let him watch that movie. But I guess, Tom Cruise has some leverage over them because he's almost the main guy.
Okay, it was awarded the Golden Lion at the Venice Film Festival, but the award was quickly revoked.
Yeah, this kind of doesn't make any sense. And it was a big thing at the time.
What is the Golden Lion?
So the Venice Film Festival is one of the biggest festivals in the world, and winning the Golden Lion is the grand prize.
Oh, okay.
The Joker won it when it came out in 2019, or in 2019 it won it. It's a big deal. Usually when your movie wins the Golden Lion, it's almost like a shoe-in to get nominated for Best Picture at the Oscars. Not that they go, oh, it won, now we should nominate it. It's just if it's that big of a deal. But the reason they revoked the award is because Paul Thomas Anderson got Best Director, and then Philip Seymour Hoffman and Joaquin Phoenix were given a joint award for Best Actor or Best Lead Performance.
Mm-hmm.
And then when they went to give it, they originally announced that it was going to be The Master who won it, but then there was a technicality in the rules where a movie can't get more than 2 awards, which is, I don't know why. So then they gave it to some other movie. I forget. I think it was like a Japanese movie. So it was a movie with a title I couldn't really pronounce.
So they just took it away?
Yeah.
Did they do an award ceremony and give it to them and then take it away?
They actually had that guy, Justin Horowitz, come out and go, no, guys, there's been a mistake. It's Moonlight. Moonlight won the Golden Lion. It hasn't even been made yet. It's 4 years away.
The Master opened nationwide on September 21st, 2012, to critical praise. However, audiences were left scratching their heads, and the movie grossed $28 million off a $32 million budget.
Now, I might need help explaining this movie because basically all my thoughts on this movie are just trying to explain what happened. Because I've seen this 4 or 5 times. The vibes when I first watched it were crazy. I was like, this is great. Do I understand a single scene? No. Yeah. But this is so fantastic. So I'm not going to go off the notes, but just in case I get lost, I will refer to the notes because I really don't want to get this wrong. So I'm going to read off my notes. No, I'm kidding. So the thing that I like about The Master, and this is something Paul Thomas Anderson talked about, was he goes, yeah, if I'm going to do a war movie and there's going to be war flashbacks or something to explain that he's all messed up from the war, I can do a war flashback, but that costs time and money. That's a whole big thing. And then I have to figure out a way to do it like nobody's ever done it before. Mm-hmm. I can do that, or I can just open up on that shot of Joaquin wearing his helmet, and you just see that 1,000-yard stare he has, and just hold on that for 30 seconds, and that's everything you need to know about Joaquin. Mm-hmm. And also there's no dialogue really there's no actual dialogue that explains anything about his character in the first 15 minutes or so. There's some talking about to the doctor and the Let There Be Light sequence when he's in the army hospital or the military hospital. There's some talking there, but most of the stuff we learn about him is just shown through visuals. So again, we see that shot of him in the beginning, and we can tell that he has like shell shock, or he's messed up from the war. He saw some stuff, and then we see that he's doing all this alcohol concocting. It's like, okay, so he's an alcoholic, and then we see that he's deprived of the female touch because there's a scene where all the soldiers are making the giant sand woman, and he initially goes down and humps it, and it's funny, but then he just keeps doing it, and all the guys are like, this is pretty weird, and then he walks away, and the next thing you see is him masturbating, and so that sets up his character so well. And then we see him in the department store.
And even just the way he's standing is very strange.
He's sitting weirdly like hands on hips.
Yeah.
Paul Thomas Anderson talking. He goes, I wrote a lot of The Master. I could never write that he stands like that.
Yeah.
And
stands out though.
Literally stands out.
Yeah.
And then there's the sequence in the department store where the girl, the model who's advertising that dress, he goes into the dark room and he's able to have a short moment where he can mix his alcohol concocting thing and his lust for women in one scene. But then that can't hold up in the long term because then they go out on a date and he just falls asleep. And then the next day at work, he's just really I heard somebody describe his face as a wound up fist. He's just standing there and all of a sudden he just turns the camera and then walks over to the guy and just starts putting the lights on him, and then he gets in a fight and he leaves, basically showing that whatever he went through in the war and the subsequent effects of that have manifested in, let's say, his alcoholism or his lust for women, he's having trouble assimilating back into society, basically. Yeah. And then he goes and has his own he makes a drink for that guy, I guess in whatever country, Mexico. I don't know where he is, but he's farming or harvesting, and then that guy may have died, and has a crazy reaction to his alcohol. And they go, "No, you killed him." He goes, "I didn't kill anybody." And then he runs. Then the next time we see him, he's walking by this harbor, and he sees a boat, and he just gets back on the boat. He's just drawn, but he just drifts back to the sea wherever he goes. And on that boat, the Alethea, I think, is where he meets Lancaster Dodd. And he's kind of cued into this weird family dynamic and this weird cultish thing that he's got going on. But he seems to connect with Lancaster pretty quickly. And Lancaster, through that processing scene where he has to answer all those rapid fire questions without blinking, it puts his brain through such an extreme stress that he has this psychological moment that feels like he's improved, where he finds out that the one thing he wants in life is that girl Doris that he left behind. And he kind of has that experience and finds this faith in Lancaster that, this man should be able to show me a way in life. And so he sticks around and becomes their most loyal member, but his recklessness and his alcoholism and his lust for women are not fitting, and they're being repressed in the cause's circle. And this can be shown when there's a great scene where he is watching Lancaster talk, and Lancaster's daughter comes over and like rubs her hand on his groin. And initially he's like, "Oh," and then he sees Clark, her husband, and he moves, and then Freddie decides to move. He displays an amazing self-control for this character, and then puts her arm away and leaves, right? And the next scene we see him in, he's drunk in the corner, and he's just so sexually frustrated that while Lancaster sings, he sees all the women naked.
Yeah.
And in this scene we see Lancaster cue him into "I want a drink," and then we see Peggy looking at Freddie, and then the next scene, Peggy jerks or masturbates Lancaster and shows like a control over him in the craziest way possible. I don't know if you remember. Do you remember that scene?
No, I can't remember.
Where she wants him to stop drinking, and she starts stroking him, and she's whispering in her ear right as he's like climaxing, going, "Say you'll stop drinking. Say you'll stop drinking." He goes, "I'll stop drinking." It's nuts. It's crazy. So anyway, next scene, she goes, "Freddie, you can't drink anymore. Stop it." And he's like, "Well, shit." So now he can't have sex. He can't drink. And he's extremely frustrated. And then there's this perfect storm happens where he goes outside, and Val goes, "He's making this up as he goes along." And Freddie's, "What are you talking about?" And then the police come and arrest Lancaster. And then Freddie lashes out from this frustration because now he's been told that the guy who's supposed to be showing him a way in life is making it up as he goes along. And then they have that argument in the prison where Freddie is basically the animal, just ripping stuff with his teeth and kicking the toilet, and Lancaster's going, "Your anger is an implant from millions of years ago." He's super calm, and then Freddie goes, "You're making this shit up." And then as soon as Freddie confronts Lancaster that he might be lying, Lancaster just lashes out and goes, "They are facts!" And they start going, "Fuck you!" And they just both start yelling at each other. And then the scene ends with him going, "I'm done with you." And the next time we see them, Lancaster's sitting on the porch at the house, and Freddie comes back, and it's like the best scene in the movie where Freddie and Lancaster hug it out, and then Freddie tackles Lancaster to the ground, and Philip Seymour Hoffman lets out like the greatest laugh of all time. And a really quick detour that came from Paul Thomas Anderson. There was one time, I think it was probably around maybe the time he met Maya Rudolph, where Philip Seymour Hoffman recounted, Paul came to me one time, we were hanging out, and he was in love, and we met at this bar, and we just saw each other, and we were so happy that we ended up just wrestling on the ground of this bar, and we almost got thrown out. So when that scene came, Paul Thomas Anderson was like, "Hey, remember that one time?
Yeah.
Do that with him," or whatever. That's a good story. But then they go, "All right, Freddie, again, I'm sorry I'm going on. Freddie, you have to go through this processing. We have to fix you," let's say. And Freddie's, "All right, let's do it." and they put Freddy through these extreme situations, like walking back and forth between a window and a wall, and then telling him to like feel different things. He has to be berated by all these negative comments by Clark without reacting at all. And another thing with Peggy, where she goes, change my eyes to my eyes are green, change them blue, change them to black. And what they're basically doing isn't really anything therapeutic. It's just making his brain go through extreme situations so that it forms like a kind of placebo effect to feeling something. And so he's deprived of sight, and he's just he's put through extreme discomfort by walking back and forth to the wall for hours and hours and hours. And when he finally comes to, he's so relieved that he has this overwhelming of emotion that restores his faith in Lancaster and the cause's methods, let's say. And then they go out to the desert, and Lancaster publishes his book. And then there's a convention for all the members of the cause, and they go there, and Lancaster goes up on stage. It's a pretty big scene with a big production value. They're in this big hall, and there's a whole crowd, but Paul Thomas Anderson only shows us the scene through a close-up of Lancaster and a close-up of Freddy. And when you look at Lancaster, my dad pointed this out to me. He goes, his teeth were so black in that scene. So, like, I think it was probably intentional that his teeth were so black, and you can see that he's sort of very nervous, and he's kind of making this up as he goes along. And then it cuts to Freddy, and Freddy looks massively disappointed. And I think this scene is him realizing that Lancaster's really just making this stuff up, and this isn't going to help me find a way in life. And I know this because in the very next scene, the first shot of the next scene, Freddy's is backstage, like in the kitchen, let's say, and he's walking back and forth with his eyes closed in the same manner he was walking back and forth between the window and the wall, which restored his faith in the cause. And then a guy comes in, Bill, who's played by the same guy who played Daniel Plainview's brother. He comes in. He goes, did you read the book? And Freddy's like, yeah, it's great, right? And he goes, I think it's a piece of shit. And then Freddy goes, can I talk to you outside for a second? And then Freddy just beats the shit out of him because he's frustrated that he's like, why am I spending my time here? This guy's whatever. And then they go out to the desert, and he goes, pick a point and drive the motorcycle to that point. Lancaster goes, it's fun. It's a scene out of Melvin and Howard, which is the Jonathan Demme movie, which is great. And then Freddy just goes, and he doesn't come back. And there's this great close-up of Lancaster Dodd where he realizes that he's not coming back. He just goes, Freddy! But then, I'm sorry, I'm just explaining the movie to people. But I think this is a movie that warrants an actual step-by-step explanation as to what was going on. So then Freddy goes back to his home, I think in Lynn, Massachusetts, to go find Doris because now he's like, I know Doris can maybe show me a way in life. That's maybe what I'm supposed to do. And he goes to her house, and her mom tells her, she's married with kids now. She married Jason Day. He goes, Jason Day? So now her name is Doris Day, like the Doris Day. And then he's, well, shit. So then the next time we see him, he's sleeping again like he was on his date with that woman. He's drunkenly sleeping at the movie theater watching Casper the Ghost. And then there's a phone call for him. It's Lancaster. I don't know how he called him at the movie theater from England. He goes, we're in England. Come visit. Freddy goes, all right. So he gets back on a boat, goes to England, and they basically have their last attempt to kind of save their friendship because they have this amazing, even though all of Lancaster's stuff is bullshit, the only thing that one can believe in the movie that is actually like transcendental in time and space is their connection because they have such great chemistry and they get along so well. That's the only thing that feels like it has an ethereal, supernatural quality is their relationship. Anyway, back to England. This is where the climax of them having to face the dilemma of their relationship comes to, it's the climax. And the reason why Lancaster is so drawn to Freddy is because Lancaster is so trapped and repressed by this web of lies that he spun that he can't get out of, that he's jealous of Freddy's freewheeling spirit and ultimate freedom. Freddy's the ultimate drifter. That's the problem in his life. But Lancaster represents the polar end or the opposite of what Freddy's going through. And I think he sees there's a scene where he talks about like a dragon, about how he tamed a dragon. I think that has something to do with Freddy. And I think Peggy, the reason why she doesn't like Freddy throughout the whole movie is because she knows that Lancaster loves Freddie and wants to spend time with him, but she thinks Freddie is bad for Lancaster, which is why she stops getting him to drink booze with him, because she thinks this very carefully curated world is getting upended by Freddie. But it's in this scene where Lancaster tries to get Freddie to stay. He goes, I discovered where we met each other. We met during this Prussian War or whatever. And then he starts singing to Freddie the song that played while during their first processing scene. I want to get you on a slow boat to China, all to myself alone. And they both start crying because they realize that they're best friends and they're maybe soulmates, but Lancaster does not have he cannot show Freddie a way in life, and Freddie realizes that he has to do this on his own, that the cause is not a place for him. And how that relates to Scientology is just, it's not saying Scientology is bad or good, like the cause is bad or good. I don't think it's making a moral judgment, but it's just saying that it's not going to help you find a way in life, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And then Freddie ends up leaving. And there's an interesting thing that the movie ends. So he goes to England, and then after he leaves Lancaster's office, he finds a woman in a bar, a British woman, and they start to have sex, and he does the processing questionnaire on her. And then the movie ends by cutting to Freddie with laying next to the big woman in the sand woman. And there was only 3 times we saw the sand woman. That scene, the beginning, and then there was a scene during the processing scene where PTA cuts to a shot of Freddie trying to build the sand woman, and some water comes and washes it away, maybe hinting at the processing of the cause, like repressing his desires or primal urges. I mean, I don't know what that shot exactly means, but I think it might be something like that. But then at the end, he's next to the woman, and it doesn't represent the loneliness that he felt when we first saw him with the woman in the beginning. I think it represents it shows that he has the woman's touch, or the connection, an intimate connection with a woman that he's been looking for all along.
Mm-hmm.
Because he's been looking for sex the whole time. But when we get to the end, it's not like, it doesn't feel like lustful sex with that woman. She's slowly on top of him, and they're just talking, bond, and having this moment together. And I think what ultimately that is probably showing or saying about Freddie is Lancaster, the cause can't show him a way in life. Lancaster can't show him a way in life. Maybe he can't show him a way in life, but maybe he'll never find it. But if he's looking for it, maybe being with a woman or finding a good woman is a good way to start. Or something.
Yeah.
So that's basically my whole what I interpreted from the movie. That's just like the surface level, what was even going on stuff, you know?
Surface level. In-depth 30-minute breakdown of a movie.
What do you think
calls
about
it surface level.
What do you think about that, pal?
That was good, yeah.
So you have seen The Master. What did you because I remember you talked about how you had complicated feelings with Inherent Vice. Do you have complicated feelings with The Master that's similar to that?
I think I have complicated feelings with a lot of Paul Thomas Anderson's movies in that way, where it's the same thing that I had with a lot of Kubrick's movies. I need to watch them more.
Yeah.
I can't just watch them once or twice. I have to watch it. I mean, how many times have you seen The Master? Probably
Maybe 5.
5. Yeah. And you have a good grasp on it, but you probably didn't. You said you didn't get that after the first two times watching it through. I think I've seen The Master twice, and it's still just, it's something I need to watch more, and I love it.
It's just you get the vibes.
Yeah, I get the vibes. It's just there's so much to take in that I could not tell you like exactly how I feel about it.
Yeah,
in the way that you just said.
Yeah. One thing that really helped me is doing this podcast. Like, I don't know if I watched The Master again, if I would have understood it as good as I do now if I wasn't doing this podcast.
Yeah.
Where I just write it down. Just write, like, if anybody's watching, try one time just, like, watching a movie that you never understood, and then just write down 1,000 words on it and see what you come up with.
Yeah.
That seemed to help me a lot. in this. I showed my mom The Master. She doesn't like it. She goes, I want to call Paul Thomas Anderson and tell him what the hell was going on in this movie. And then I basically just told her
Everything.
whatever. And she goes, eh.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
You know what's crazy? This didn't get nominated for Best Cinematography.
But it did get. So Hoffman, Phoenix, and Amy Adams received Oscar nominations for their performances. However, Anderson and all other departments didn't receive any, which is nuts.
I don't expect
Crazy.
I don't expect a Best Picture nod or anything, but cinematography.
Yeah.
This is the best. I watched it on my TV, my $200 TV, and have you ever? Let me ask you this question: have you ever watched a movie like when I watched The Batman? I remember feeling like I've never seen a movie like this before. The way this looks is insane. And then the second and third time I watched it, I got accustomed to it, and I didn't get that feeling of, I didn't get that dopamine hit of I've never seen this before.
Mm-hmm.
I still, every time I watch The Master, I still go, that looks crazy good. Because they filmed it on this old 65 millimeter. Well, they filmed it on 65 millimeter, and then got these old Panavision cameras that hadn't been used since Kenneth Branagh's Hamlet in 1996. And there are these giant cameras, and Anderson's getting these close-ups on these people's faces and putting the camera right here as this big, loud camera. Anderson talks about how a lot of the times during the production, they'd be filming, and Philip Seymour Hoffman would just go, "You and your fucking cameras," because they were just
taking
these
forever.
giant things that were moving around the set. They're almost a distraction of the actors.
I mean, I could see that. We'll get to that in Phantom Thread. I watched a thing of him breaking down the different
The camera
camera tests, and it blew my mind because, we film on digital, and it's like if you want to add a filter later on, you just go on and add the filter. You have to pick the camera for the filter. I didn't realize that. You change the camera and it's a whole nother look. Yeah. I mean, I knew it, but I didn't realize it until I saw that, how, you have to be sure about it.
And also, speaking of the cinematography, this is the first Paul Thomas Anderson movie where Robert Elswit was not the cinematographer.
Oh, really?
He was the cinematographer for every single Paul Thomas Anderson movie. He won for There'll Be Blood.
Mm-hmm. Why was I
think it was just scheduling stuff. And also, the one last thing I'll say is there's speaking of Phantom Thread, there's a trend in these particular Paul Thomas Anderson movies, The Master, Inherent Vice, and Phantom Thread, where there's a subjectivity. I guess you can argue it's in Punch Drunk Love too, but it's much more subtle in these movies. There's a subjectivity in the movie where, for example, the way that the processing and the causes methods work in The Master is very, very complicated because you're operating on this very weird, ambiguous frequency in your brain where your brain can just be diluting itself. Like, this woman goes into like this meditation with Lancaster at this fundraising event, and she comes out of it and she goes, "The man in shining armor, was that me?" And he goes, "Yes, you exist on a whole time scale where that's you, and that represents you coming out of your whatever." And to her, that's a real moment. But to me, every night before I go to bed, and my brain starts to get all tired, I see things. That's just my brain randomly doing stuff. What?
It's just funny.
I don't see things like I'm hallucinating, but you see like weird things.
Yeah.
And in this, and also when you're putting your mind through extreme situations like they do with the processing and The Master, there's almost this and also telling people that this is going to work. There's a placebo effect that's operating in The Master. There's the scene where Peggy is telling Freddie, "Change my eyes from blue to green or green to blue, and I'll turn them black." And then in the movie, you actually see Peggy's eyes turn black. In reality, her eyes aren't turning black, but Freddie is going through so much processing that his brain is tricking himself into thinking that her eyes are actually black. And that's again, I don't really know how to put my finger on it, but it's a weird subjective frequency where there's a dissonance between reality and Freddie's perspective that is there in Doc's perspective and reality and Inherent Vice, and also Reynolds' perspective and Phantom Thread.
Yeah, and it's interesting too because in real life, it's almost people who find themselves in a situation where they're going to be going through processing like that where they're in a cultish type of atmosphere, they're usually looking for something like that.
Yes.
Or their
Yes,
mind is
that's
just
a great
more
point.
open to it.
Yes.
So it's easier to placebo them into thinking, making their eyes look black or just feeling like it's working because they want it to work.
Yeah.
They're convincing themselves at the same time because they're out in the world actively seeking something like that, which is usually what you would see, someone like Freddie, who's going through a lot. Those are the types of people who end up in situations like that,
Right.
cults and stuff.
And Paul Thomas Anderson talked about, and that's like part of the genius of picking this movie to take place during this time, is he talks about after the war, a lot of people were looking for something to show them a way in life, whether it was dieting, yoga, Scientology, whatever it was, or some weird cult stuff. And Freddie, of course, is the epitome of that idea of somebody who needs to grasp onto something to find meaning after this crazy war. And that's something that you just brought up, and that was really interesting.
Inherent Vice 2014. Shortly after The Master, PTA chose to adapt the novel Inherent Vice by the reclusive and enigmatic author Thomas
Pynchon.
Pynchon.
Well, some people say Pynchon and some people say Pynchon.
Yeah.
But he's interesting because he's sort of it's Mark Maron and Paul Thomas Anderson were talking about how when he writes, like, it feels like he knows something that you don't about everything. And he's very nobody. I don't think anybody knows what he looks like now, or where he lives or anything. He's very, very like secretive and reclusive. And apparently, Paul Thomas Anderson made him do like a secret agreement about not to say what he thinks about the movie or anything about him. Josh Brolin says that he has a cameo in the movie, and nobody has found it.
They got
Thomas
Thomas
Pynchon.
Pynchon's in the movie, and
Nobody has been able to pinpoint who he is in the movie. Maybe Josh Brolin was just lying, or maybe he was cut out of the movie. I don't know.
I bet he's in the scene with all the hoods and stuff.
That's a good point. Ooh, that's good. That would make sense.
That make a lot of sense. He's the guy with the swastika.
Oh, yeah. He's the last guy you'd expect to be like a genius writer. So he adapted that, and Paul Thomas Anderson, because it's such a difficult book, because Oil, when he adapted that, wasn't an actual adaptation. I mean, it was, but he took a lot of liberties. But since he's such a big fan of Thomas Pynchon, he wanted it to be truthful to the source novel. He didn't want to mess it up.
Yeah.
And his thing was Thomas Pynchon's going to be really hard to get right, but if anybody's going to mess it up, it's going to be me. And so he what he did was just transcribe the entire book as a screenplay, and it was about like 5 inches thick. And usually his sister reads the screenplays for feedback, and she just gave it right back to him. He goes, "I'm not reading this. Cut this shit down."
Yeah.
And he goes, which in reality is actually very good advice.
Yeah, this is the first piece of advice. Get rid of 90% of it.
Exactly.
How do you know how many pages it actually was, though?
I would imagine it was probably between the realm of like 300 to 400, maybe 500. Paul Thomas, he has a script that's 600 pages that he says he can't figure it out. He can't figure out how to get it shorter.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Of Inherent Vice?
No, of just like a secret
something.
project. Yeah, that's just a little. Anyway.
So reportedly, Robert Downey Jr. was initially cast as the protagonist, Doc Sportello.
So apparently he was cast before The Master. Okay. I believe that's true. And also he has a relationship with Robert Downey Jr. because Paul Thomas Anderson has a relationship with Robert Downey Sr., who actually I just spoiled it. But if you can tell me what that purple and pink DVD is behind Danny's head on the top there, if you can tell me what that is, I'll give you a crisp like button on your comment. And so Robert Downey Sr. is in Magnolia. He plays one of the booth guys. And he's also the guy in Boogie Nights, who is the record label guy who won't give them the tapes of their... Yeah. And there's a movie called Putney Swope. And you know the scene... I can't believe we didn't talk about that scene in Boogie Nights. The Jesse's Girl with the Rahad Jackson, the guy the drug dealer guy.
Oh, yeah. Why
and
didn't
Mark
we talk
Wahlberg
about
just
that?
spaces out. I mean, we talked about Boogie Nights for so
Yeah,
long.
yeah.
Anyway, great scene. And but
That's
that scene,
covered in so many other
yeah,
things.
so many people have talked about that. But the firecracker, this is a known thing too, but I'm
Yeah.
going to say it. The firecrackers, that movie Putney Swope, I've seen that. There's a scene where these Chinese businessmen walk in, and in the background, one of the Chinese businessmen is just throwing firecrackers at the ground. And Paul Thomas Anderson asked Robert Downey Jr., "Can I just steal that?" And he was like, "Yeah, go for it." And it makes the scene so. John C. Reilly says he still has PTSD from firecrackers from that scene because every time he would jump.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
it's, oh my god. Anyway, so Robert Downey Jr. was going to be Doc Sportello, which would have been awesome, but apparently, I don't know exactly how it went down. Also, why did I say apparently? Like apparently, he PTA thought he was too old to play Doc Sportello, so he went back to Joaquin Phoenix, who he used in The Master. Yes.
Who they're kind of like the same age though.
Yeah, right. I don't know.
It doesn't make it much of a difference.
I don't know.
It's not like he went to a way younger character.
Yeah, but also Joaquin.
I could see Robert Downey Jr. passing as a younger person than
Right.
Joaquin Phoenix.
Really?
It depends on how he's
Yeah.
portrayed.
I honestly though I think Joaquin. I would love to see Robert Downey Jr. do that, but I think Joaquin is probably the best choice, especially for a Paul Thomas Anderson movie like this in The Master, because his physicality is the best. Nobody is good at doing physical gags or comedy or physical anything in a movie than Joaquin Phoenix. The way he stands in The Master, the way he moves around, the way he gets thrown around in this movie is absolutely fantastic. Josh Brolin talked about it while filming, going, Joaquin's small and he's kind of a skinny, small guy, but he is so strong. There was a scene where I had to get him in a car, and it was like the hardest thing I've ever had to do because he's just so scrappy. Like, remember in Napoleon when Joaquin he's trying to change the vote. And they all chase him out, and he's running out, and he's punching the guys. The physicality, he's so good. I'm like, why don't people move like that more in movies? That's so fantastic. Maybe I don't know if this was it, but I'm speculating. But maybe that's why PTA thought maybe Robert Downey Jr. wasn't the best choice because he was afraid of getting thrown around a little bit. But I don't know. That's my personal opinion.
Yeah, I love that scene in Napoleon where he just turns around, he starts to punch over the thing.
Yeah, it's so good.
It's so little kid, too, though.
Oh my god.
Filming began in May 2013 and was described by the main cast as organized chaos.
Yes. A lot of them talked about the freedom they had where since the movie is supposed to be, there's a very sudden cartoonish comedy that it has. And so they would do scenes, like let's say that the moto penakeku, that scene, my favorite scene of the movie. That scene, maybe the first take would be Jozo moto penakeku, and then the next scene moto penakeku, and then they just kept dialing it up and up and up and up and up until they couldn't do it. They couldn't go any bigger, right? And that's probably what was so fun about it for PTA, but maybe confusing for the actors. Like, you really want me to do that? Like Joaquin I'm going to take the picture and scream at it when he sees the picture. And it's so. I think that's really good. And I'll get to my thoughts on Inherent. Well, I'll get to my overall thoughts on Inherent Vice later. But
I think things like that, where he takes the thing and screams and then she doesn't really react to that much. Right?
Yeah, well, the way it's edited is a little weird because she gives him the picture and you see his hand take it, and then like 5 seconds later, it cuts to Joaquin and he's just taking the picture.
Well, things like that are when I started realizing, is it actually happening? Or is in his mind, is he screaming?
Yes.
There's a lot of things
point.
in this movie where you don't know if it's actually happening.
Yes.
And I think that's one of those points where I started realizing, did he actually just scream, or because she doesn't really react to it, and there's things before that hint to it, but that was one of those moments for me.
I'm so curious to hear what you thought about this movie. Can you read the next thing so you can just tell me what you thought?
Inherent Vice opened nationwide on January 9th, 2015. It received positive reviews from critics, but suffered the worst box office of Anderson's career, excluding Hard 8.
So I'm very curious to hear what you have to say about it. Normally I would go first, but I think it's better to hear someone who has some immediate, unfiltered thoughts about Inherent Vice than maybe just a guy who thinks he's solved it all.
Yeah.
I really
yeah.
would not to say that you're an idiot, which you are.
Yeah.
But I'm so curious to hear.
It's hard to give my opinion because I really have. After watching it, I have no idea what happened. I have an idea, but at the same time, I feel when it was over, I really felt as if I wasn't paying attention hard enough, and I really was paying attention.
Yeah.
I was watching this movie and like looking at it, and it's just, it happens, and it's over, and I'm just thinking, was I paying attention? Because there's so many things where it's hard to tell if he's real. Like certain people are real in the movie. Yes. The saxophone player. He meets him in the alley.
Owen Wilson.
Yeah, Owen Wilson's Coy. He meets him in an alley and he turns away and he's gone.
But he's still whispering.
Yeah. And so that makes you think, are all of his next interactions with that character even real? That sends it off.
I didn't even think. I've thought about that for other characters, but not Coy. That's interesting.
For me,
he wasn't real.
Yeah, the whole time I'm thinking, is this guy real? But then it throws you off too, because as a character, Doc Sportello, when he's talking to the FBI, he's so confident. He's so sure of himself in certain scenes, and then there's little moments where he's not. And it throws the whole thing off, because for someone to be so confident in certain situations, and then you see something where it seems, is he crazy?
Right. Can you give me an example of the craziness?
The craziness, I mean, he walks outside and just jumps on the car. Why did he do that?
Oh, when Bigfoot was there?
Yeah,
I think he was trying to jump over the car, but he tripped.
Oh, okay. See,
okay. You just thought he was going insane. Okay.
Well, that's just one that came to my mind. But I mean, he's in the alleyway and he sees the guy and he disappears. Yeah. Is that real? Is that not real? Do you have any other examples that I'm not coming up with? That
I'm trying to think. I think I will say, while I'm trying to figure out another example, or while you're trying to figure another example, I will say that I think you are sort of not supposed to understand the movie sort of by design. Yeah. I've read the book. I'm not smart enough to understand it. Let alone, I barely smart enough to understand the movie, let alone the book. I have like a 6th grade reading level. But because Paul Thomas Anderson describes, you watch the movie, and there's a scene where Doc hears a certain piece of information. Then the next scene, he hears a piece of information that contradicts that first piece of information. Then in the third scene, he finds out information that confirms both of those pieces of information. And you're like, well, which one's true? This doesn't make... What's going on? And... also there's the scene where in the beginning where Doc is sitting in his room smoking. I think this is when he calls Aunt... whatever her name is, and she goes, she's technically Jewish, but wants to be a Nazi, that call. And he sees Bigfoot on the TV we see Bigfoot on the TV for the first time, and he's dressed as a hippie, and he's selling like a real estate commercial. And then he goes up to the camera, Bigfoot, and looks at Doc through the television lens. He goes, what's up, Doc? And he just goes, oh.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Stuff like that. And, all right. I'm so confident that if I try to talk about this movie without looking at the notes that I wrote down, it will not make any sense.
Yeah.
I'm going to read this.
Still might not.
Yes, probably. I'm going to read this off, and I'm not going to try to read it in a monotone. Yes, this has happened. I'm going to try to say it normally. Just bear with me. I have to read it, okay? So, the most common criticism of Inherent Vice is the challenging and incoherent plot, which could be why it never found the mainstream audience, even though the subject matter lends itself to being a classic private detective story. However, this incoherent plot is part of the premise of the book, following Doc through this labyrinth of American conspiracies obscured by marijuana smoke. This premise was deliberately transposed by PTA into the screenplay, and when it comes to the question of does it work, I have mixed feelings. Because obviously it's truthful to Pynchon's novel, But then for a modern audience or a mainstream audience, they're going to be like, what is going on? And I think it does affect the entertainment value somewhat. Not that's the only thing that's important in a movie. The movie's very intellectually stimulating, but as a watching experience, I think it's a case where sometimes it's a little bit better to think about than it is to watch. And I don't mean that absolutely in an absolute way. I sort of have mixed feelings about that. As I explained when we were talking about The Master, the unreality in The Master exists in a placebo of the processing methods of the cause. Peggy's sequence, for example, in her eyes changing from black to green and Freddy, that's the example of that. However, in Inherent Vice, this unreality is incited by Doc's paranoia, a result of the plot he's trying to uncover, but also his chronic marijuana smoking. The first instance of this unreality comes when Doc watches Bigfoot on the real estate TV, and he says, "What's up, Doc?" We got to that. And then from this moment, it's understood that Doc is an unreliable narrator. Deciphering what is real or hippie hallucination is going to be tough for the non-patient audience. PTA talked about the complexity of Doc learning information, which is what I said about you learn the piece of information, then you learn the information that contradicts it, and then a piece of information that confirms the two, and you're like, what the hell is going on? And at some point, the connections that Doc makes between these multiple plot points, between Coy and then the Golden Fang and then the dentist, make him... He can't tell if he's just being paranoid. Yeah. And this sentiment of schizophrenia is expressed by Coy at the Spotted Dick party. He goes, "The thing I learned from snitching was how often people ask questions they already know the answers to. They just want to hear it from another voice outside their own head." The ambiguity between real or hallucinatory gives freedom to the idea that Sortilege and Shasta also exist only in Doc's mind. Sortilege is his friend, who's this weird narrator, and she has a weird presence over the movie. And her presence contrasts with the rest of the cast. She seems to be omnipresent over the story and is only interacted with by Doc. The only time she's brought up by another character in the story is by Shasta in the final scene. Adam Naiman, who wrote that orange book behind Danny, talked about the possibility of this scene taking place in Doc's head. Doc drives at night with his arm around Shasta. The car is surrounded by this weird cloudy haze, which suggests that Doc is taking a trip down memory lane. This is emphasized by Shasta asking Doc, "Remember that day the Ouija board sent us off into that big storm? It feels the same way tonight." The last time we saw the aforementioned scene was when Doc was quite literally taking a trip down memory lane when he walks and sees the Golden Fang building.
Yeah.
Right after the flashback scene with him and Shasta in the rain. Naiman says that the light that Doc catches in his eye in the final scene, and then he smiles into the camera, can represent him seeing through the hazy facade of this memory, or him being willfully blind to it and still just wanting to be, hung up on his ex-old lady. And however, I find the Shasta through line to be the least interesting in the story. We see her in two giant scenes in the opening and one later, and both are very long and talky. And I always end up forgetting to listen to the dialogue. I don't know if you felt that during her two scenes. Mm-hmm. They're super long. They're really long. They're at least like 5 or 6 minutes. The first one is probably 5. The second one she's in, where she comes back and Doc has sex with her, that's really, really long, and it goes on for a long time. All right, last paragraph. The central idea of Inherent Vice is as elusive as the plot. Inherent Vice is the tendency in physical objects to deteriorate because of the fundamental instability of the components in which they are made. I think the title Inherent Vice refers to the degenerative state of America, and evil has infiltrated America's institutions in order to make a profit. The CIA works with the Golden Fang to bring heroin into the country. The Golden Fang then profits off of the dentistry services paid by the buyers of their product, etc. Those are the heroin addicts who go with the Golden Fang. And we follow Doc as he realizes the rotten structure of America's institutions, the reality of which is so world-shattering that he questions if he's just being paranoid. Of course, at the end, Doc will not uncover what's really going on to the mainstream consciousness of the public like in a more traditional Hollywood movie. The conspiracies are too powerful to him to have any effect. However, what he can do is to make sure one family can stay together after it was driven apart by the corrupt institutions. That's when the story becomes about Coy and his family. He goes, I'm not going to stop this giant conspiracy, but I might be able to work with them so that one person gets out free. Mm-hmm. And Inherent Vice is a movie that I admire for staying true to the book, but I think there are pros and cons to this that make the movie more intellectually stimulating, possibly less entertaining, and I'm happy with what we got, but I'm curious of what could have been. Inherent Vice is a movie that gets better the longer ago I have watched it. Sometimes I forget that it can feel like a chore to watch. If there's any movie that one should have a half-baked, confused notions or feeling on like these, it's probably Inherent Vice.
Yeah.
How did I get through that? Was that good?
That was good. That was good.
Did that
I agree.
make any sense?
The last sentence you just said, I agree wholeheartedly with, because it was when I watched it right after I think I had texted you or something. And I just said
I couldn't wait.
I don't get it.
Yeah.
But now that I've had time to process it and just think about it more, I like it more than right after I watch it. Right after I watch it, I usually don't dislike movies other than, really bad movies, obviously. But this movie, after I watched it, I really wanted to love it, and then I watched it and I was like, what?
Yeah.
I just don't get it.
It's that movie where people talk about, I hope it's not like Inherent Vice. And I go, what do you mean? Inherent Vice is really good. And before I rewatched it again for this podcast, I'm like, this is a objectively great movie. Because it is like Punch Drunk Love, where even if I don't understand it, those individual scenes in it are so good. Like the visual or physical gags in the movie, the comedy of the visuals is so strong and so unique. But I feel like the movie just moves too slow sometimes. And I guess it feels slow because at some point my brain just turns it off. Turns the plot off because I can't understand it. I do have vague notions of what was going on, but I don't know exactly how it all. And I guess that's the point where, because it's this labyrinth of marijuana smoke, and you're just trying to see some ideas through these puffs of smoke. And this is another half-baked thought, but
yeah, I do, however, like Doc Sportello as a character.
Yes.
I mean, he's awesome. Just like you said, the physical gags and stuff that he goes through are just great. Yeah. And just the way he reacts to certain things, when he walks into the sex club, whatever that place is, they're like selling sex on the development, which don't even know if it's real too.
Oh yeah,
that seems like something.
Oh yeah. What's his name? Oh yeah, Chuck. He eats pussy.
Yeah,
yeah.
And then they just both start, she just goes down on the other girl, and the way he watches.
Well, and
so
or the
funny.
way when they start going at it, and he goes, "Well, it says here the preview special," because he's like wants to. It's so, and then the way he gets hit, and he goes,
yeah,
fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
That's a great sequence.
Stuff like
Bigfoot. We didn't even talk about Bigfoot being gay.
Oh,
how much time do we have left? All right, good. Yeah, so there's a sequence where, okay, so obviously Bigfoot is a man's man, or at least cosmetically a man's man in the movie, right? So there's a scene where he's eating a chocolate banana, and he holds in the banana for a very long time, and Doc's just looking at him eat the banana.
Yeah.
And there's a scene where we find out that Bigfoot's partner was effectively killed by Adrian Prussia. And there's a scene that's part of a somewhat deleted scene, but there's a snippet of it that remains in the movie where Adrian walks by and he goes, "Enjoying your banana, Bigfoot?" He says something like nice hippie Bigfoot, some bullshit. And Bigfoot goes, "Hey, you want a banana? I'll stick it in for you." Associating the banana with a penis, like a phallic thing. And also his wife is this domineering lady named Chastity.
Yeah, that was interesting to see.
I think it's not, the movie doesn't present it as this is a clear-cut evidence that he's gay, but it just makes you think, like, is he what?
Yeah. He's just covering up with his ultra manly man macho-ness. And
I think Josh Brolin might be my favorite performance in the movie.
Yeah.
He's so good. And that's a thing that, like, the duality of these two characters in this movie, starting with There'll Be Blood, there's Daniel and Eli. Then there's Lancaster and Freddy. Then there's Doc and Bigfoot. There's Reynolds and Alma and Phantom Thread. And then in Licorice Pizza, there's Alana and Gary, but I don't find them that compelling as the rest. Anyway, so what were you going to say?
Well, the difference between Doc and Bigfoot, their internal struggles are completely swapped. Yeah. Bigfoot is just he gets dominated by his wife, not in that way, but
Maybe
based
in
off that
way.
one scene. Yeah, maybe
Yeah.
in that way. Based off that one scene, you just see she's tells him like,
Get the fuck up.
yeah, and he just
What's
does
his first name? Christian. Get the fuck up, Christian. But yeah, I that's a good observation I hadn't thought of before. Doc, obviously, like Doc's life and the way he lives it is very unstructured and chaotic, but internally he's very cool and collected and kind of just goes with the flow. And Bigfoot, I guess, is kind of struggling with like achieving the American dream. I guess.
Mm-hmm. And at the end, you realize he takes a hit of the weed.
Oh, he just eats it. Yeah.
Well, that's another scene where, in
Yeah.
my mind, I'm like,
That could easily
there's no
take
way
place
that's
outside of his head.
Yeah,
Because
that's not real.
I remember seeing that for the first time and going, that is the funniest thing I've ever seen, and I have no idea what it means, and I still feel that way.
Phantom Thread 2017. The idea for Phantom Thread famously came when Anderson was very sick and his wife, Maya Rudolph, was taking care of him. Anderson noticed the look in her eye that made him think, maybe she wants to keep me like this.
Yeah, so he had the idea. That was just such a simple, raw idea, and he didn't have anything else from that. He was like, yeah, this movie started from just man and woman. And then I just had these little extra pieces that came together. And in the writing process, he talked about how he recruited Daniel Day-Lewis and cast him in the lead role very, very early, to the point where he said he should probably have like a co-writing credit, Daniel Day-Lewis, but he doesn't, so it's fine. Don't even worry about it. Shut up. Give me the Oscar. And Daniel Day-Lewis came up with the name Reynolds Woodcock. And Paul Thomas Anderson was talking about how he was eating cereal or eating his breakfast and he choked when he saw that because he was just the funniest name of all time. And another name they had was something like Arthur Dapple. I remember him saying that. I can't remember where that was. But one of the things that they both decided on is that it should be in the 1950s in the fashion industry in England. And he brought him on before there was even a draft of the script. It was just basically from the beginning of the writing process, which is, I don't think he did with anybody else, really. Maybe he did it on Licorice Pizza.
With which character?
With Alana.
Mm-hmm. Production began in England in January 2017. It was Anderson's first movie to film entirely outside of the United States. Production ended in April.
It's pretty crazy the turnaround on this movie because they started in January, and then the movie came out January 2018. Yeah. It was released, and it was basically had to be ready by December. So they had 7 months to edit it.
Yeah,
which is pretty crazy. He hasn't had a turnaround time like that since Magnolia. And he said that the production ended in May. On April 26th, that was their last day of filming, and that was the day I believe that director Jonathan Demme died. Who was a big influence on Paul Thomas Anderson. I mentioned that movie Melvin and Howard when we were talking about The Master. He did that. He also did Something Wild, Silence of the Lambs, and he died that day. He remembers filming the last shot. Right before they filmed the last shot, he learned that Demme died, and then they filmed the last shot, and all he could hear was Jonathan Demme going, "Buddy, you finally finished the movie, dude," because he was always like the nicest guy of all time. Mm-hmm. So that was kind of sad that he recounted. I think the movie's dedicated to him as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it says. Does it say that at the end?
Something it says Johnny's right.
Yeah.
It was directed to Jonathan Demme. It was dedicated to Jonathan Demme.
It was the first of Anderson's film without a credit for a cinematographer.
Yes. So I mentioned Robert Elswit wasn't the cinematographer for The Master. He came back for Inherent Vice, and reportedly he said it was like a bad marriage with Anderson and that he didn't have a good time working on that movie. And by the time they came around to Phantom Thread, he just didn't have a cinematographer. The question of who holds the light meter, which is who's the cinematographer, because usually the cinematographer has the light meter. It was Michael Bauman, I believe that was his name, was the main camera operator on Phantom Thread. But it says that Anderson has an uncredited credit as cinematographer. So he was sort of the cinematographer, but he sort of wasn't. So he doesn't get a credit for it. But Robert Elswit goes, "Yeah, I don't know if we're going to work again." Strange. I saw that story. I don't know a lot of details on it.
Mm-hmm. All you know is that it didn't really seem to work out after Inherent Vice. basically.
The relationship sort of just soured.
Yeah. As will happen if you work on that many movies. Like,
I give it 7 podcasts until that starts to happen to us.
I give it to the end of this one.
I give it to the last podcast, you idiot. I give it to this next sentence if you stutter once.
Phantom Thread opened nationwide on January 19th, 2018. It was praised by critics and made $48 million worldwide off a $35 million budget.
Yes, good. I still like you because you didn't stutter. So I know this isn't to diminish the quality of the movie, but this is like the first mom movie that Paul Thomas Anderson made where I can show this to my mom. I mentioned she didn't like The Master. She definitely wouldn't like Inherent Vice. But if I show her Phantom Thread, she goes, well, not a nice movie, but like she would like it, right? And I don't mean that as a dismissive. I think that's good. And it was like a mainstream movie. It was nominated. It was an awards darling like There Will Be Blood was that we mentioned before. Mm-hmm. So I guess he has 2 of those. And I talked about in Inherent Vice and The Master, that unreality we talked about. And there isn't that the unreality in this isn't so much. It's not the placebo effect of The Master, and it's not the paranoia of being high on weed, and there's all these corporate weird conspiracies going on. But in this, it's the unreality comes from, or the subjective effect of it comes from Reynolds's super sensitive irritability and OCD. So the first example of this is I remember seeing this this is actually the first Paul Thomas Anderson movie I saw in the theater.
Oh wow!
I saw this with Robbie Deardle. It was like midnight, and it was in the middle of January. We got out. It was like 2 a.m. It was so cold outside.
Oh, I bet.
And I remember not understanding the movie, but then I watched it a few more times, and I liked it. So the first scene comes when we see Reynolds eating breakfast with this woman named Joanna, and she goes, Reynolds, try these. And it's like this pastry. And he goes, what did I say, Joanna? No more stodgy things. And she goes, I feel like I can't get through to you. And he just kind of ignores her and goes, I can't start the day with a confrontation, and then the rest of the day will be all wrong. And then basically then the next scene, Cyril's like, should I get rid of Joanna? He's like, yeah. So he doesn't even confront his own lovers.
Yeah.
But then he meets Alma, and they have their own thing. They go on a few dates, and then after the first night they have sex, I believe it's the first night they have sex, she comes down and kisses Reynolds while he's drawing during breakfast, and then she sits down and goes, good morning, everybody, and then she starts scraping butter on her bread and pouring coffee, and it's so loud. Like, it's abnormally loud. And at first, you're like, that's not that loud. But actually, it's funny, but then some of the some reactions like my parents had were like, that's not that loud. And then once they start talking, and he goes, Alma, can you stop making so much noise? And then she goes, I'm not making noise. And then she keeps buttering her bread. Then the sound is normal. It's at a normal volume. And I think that, it's very subtle, but I think that is Reynolds' perspective of how he actually hears it. Because if that is actually how loud she was, that's crazy. That's super loud. But that's not actually how it's just skewed from Reynolds' perspective. It's sort of the same thing in Punch Drunk Love, where the world around Barry doesn't make sense because he's very socially awkward and anxious, and he doesn't understand it. But with this, it's just an exaggeration of things going on around him. The same thing happens in maybe the funniest scene in the movie to me, where it's after they get married and they go to their honeymoon in the Alps, and she's eating like porridge or oatmeal or something, and she's using her teeth to get it so she doesn't mess up her lipstick, but she's slurping, and you just see and they just got married, right? Yeah. And Reynolds does maybe the best piece of acting in the movie. Reynolds does this. He like huffs and puffs, and he's like, you could tell that he's regretting marrying her. He just goes,
yeah,
it's excellent. I think it's hilarious, but I don't think that she's actually slurping in that scene, because on their first date, he eats that custard sauce shit in the same manner, where has her teeth to not mess up her lipstick, but there's no slurping. And he's watching her very closely, and there's no slurping. But now they're slurping because his OCD is getting triggered, right? And then another scene which doesn't have as much evidence as those two instances do of being, I guess, exaggerations by Reynolds' OCD or irritability, comes when they're playing backgammon at that party. Thrown by Henrietta, and we see her shake the thing for like 10 seconds, and he goes, I think they're good and well and shaken now, idiot. He didn't say idiot, I added that. And she goes, whatever, and she rolls him. It's there's no evidence to suggest otherwise, but I think it's possible that Reynolds also, she was only shaking it for like 2 seconds. And Reynolds was like, come on, let's go.
Yeah. That all the things that you just said about Reynolds is one of the reasons why I didn't like him as a character.
Really? Didn't like him at all?
No, I like.
Oh, okay.
I know he's an excellent character, but he's very unredeemable. He has very unredeemable qualities about him that, he's narcissistic, for sure. I'm no doctor, but he's very self-centered, and he gaslights all the women in the movie, basically. Alma mostly, obviously. But it's interesting because the person who sticks with him the most is Alma, and she can handle it the most,
Right.
by far.
Well, you were telling me there were basically, you're watching two toxic people agree to a toxic relationship.
Yeah.
That they make work.
Mm-hmm, that's a full manifestation of a incredibly toxic relationship.
Right. But also, do you think it could just be not a microcosm, but maybe a metaphor or symbolism for just what it takes to make any relationship work like that? Like you have to die a little bit or give a piece of yourself.
Yeah. Have
you considered the fact that you're dead wrong?
Yeah, what the heck? No, I mean, I do think that there are parts of that are true, but I mean, to the extent where you're accepting that your partner is poisoning you.
Yeah. It's interesting because what I said about how he exaggerates these banal things, he also does that with these very petty situations where there's a scene where, what's her name? Alma comes into the breakfast room and she says hi to Cyril, and Cyril smiles, and then you see Cyril's face go white like she's about to tell Reynolds that somebody just died.
Mm-hmm.
And then she goes, there's a good chance that Barbara Rose will invite you to her wedding. And he's like, that's very, very disconcerting. It's entirely too much for breakfast or whatever.
Yeah, I wish you had waited to tell me that.
So funny. There's another scene where with the scene when she throws the surprise for him, and he goes, I'm eating. He goes, you know very well that I prefer my asparagus with oil and salt. And knowing this, you've chosen to prepare it with butter. And right now, I'm just admiring my own gallantry for eating this dish the way you've prepared it. Do you have a gun? Are you here to kill me? Are you here to ruin my evening and quite possibly my entire life?
Yeah.
The most insane things to say. The last thing I'll say is that when he goes, there's an air of quiet death in this house, and I do not like the way it smells. The most dramatic, petty bullshit, and it's hilarious. But at the same time, we can laugh at him at things like that, but then we can also laugh with him in other scenes. We also can get angry with him. We can also understand him and how much of a psycho he is about these dresses. There's a shot during the first fashion show where he's getting everybody ready backstage, and then he looks through the peephole of the door, and PTA takes a shot right out of Psycho by Hitchcock, where he looks through the door, and an audience in the know of what that shot is can be suggesting that, oh, he's a psycho about his dresses. But then you also cry with him when he gets sick for the first time, when he gets poisoned for the first time, and he sees the vision of his mother. And he goes, are you here? Are you always here? He's an incredibly complex character. That's very hard to do, to laugh at a character, but also cry with him. Mm-hmm. That's very, very complicated. What did you sense or get from allusions to Alma's backstory? Or what her deal is?
Honestly, that's something I haven't put much thought into, but judging by the fact that she's sort of willing to just leave and go with him, there must not be much holding her, Right. And in terms of how comfortable she seems in some of the situations that he puts her in, almost immediately, he's already measuring her and then
yes.
Cyril shows up and is just,
he doesn't say, hey, this is my sister. He's like, all of a sudden they're on a date, and all of a sudden
all of a sudden he's just working. And but in terms of her Alma's background, I got the sense that there must not have been much holding her, because I don't know if there's much mention of her family in general.
There's one hint that we get that suggests her backstory. And I think there was also a scene where they kind of explained it a little bit and they cut it out. I've read the script, but I forget if it's in the script. And there's a scene where Barbara Rose and her husband from the Dominican Republic, there's like a press conference before their wedding. And one of the reporters asks the husband, "What did you do?" Or "Barbara, what did you do?" Blah, 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 for business. And somebody suggests selling visas to the Jews. And all of a sudden, the movie cuts to Alma in a close-up, and she gives like a reaction. And she's not the main subject or character in that scene. We didn't even know she was in that scene, I'm pretty sure, until that shot. And that cues us into some sort of hint or suggestion that maybe she had to flee Germany. Because I think she's from Luxembourg. Was that in Germany? I don't know where that is.
It's close.
Close. So she's around, she's in Central Europe.
Probably a place you would have wanted to flee.
Yeah. So that suggests that she had to flee, and maybe she saw some shit during World War II or during the Holocaust, but also suggests that it gives her a reason to why she's so determined to stick around, because she has. I actually find from this rewatch of it, I actually found, instead of her relationship to be like a purely love relationship, I also found an aspect to it where it's her trying to survive, where she has this grit and this determination to survive and make this relationship survive. Not that she's only doing it because of that. Like, I think she does love him, but she's just very determined. She's not gonna, because we see her when I mentioned that woman Joanna, and then we see Alma in the same position, and she's framed geographically in the same shot, and we know that she's about to do something that's gonna mess up Reynolds' breakfast. That's part of the tension of the scene. So it sets her up as her being another girl in his life, but obviously she has to do. There's something different about her, which is going to make her stick around and not just have Reynolds' women in his life just exist in a revolving door. She's determined to stick around. And I think it's sort of something like that.
Mm-hmm. It was nominated for 6 Oscars: Best Picture, Best Directing, Best Actor, Best Supporting Actress, Best Original Score, and Best Costume Design, which it won. I
mean, I think Reynolds' woodcock would probably manifest in physical reality if this movie didn't win Best Costume Design.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That would have been a funny bit to do. It would have ruined the guy's win. But if Phantom Thread didn't win and then Daniel Day-Lewis dresses Reynolds woodcock, like, this is entirely wrong. There's an air of quiet death at these awards, and I do not like the way it smells.
Licorice Pizza 2021. The genesis of Licorice Pizza seemed to have come from a few different sources, but the movie is primarily based on the teenage years of movie producer Gary Goetzman.
You went to Getz Middle School, and you called it Goetzman?
Licorice Pizza.
No, I'm keeping that in. We're keeping that in. Anyway, so obviously Gary Goetzman Paul Thomas Anderson was friends with him, and he would always tell him stories. Out of the blue, he'd just go, "Hey, did I ever tell you the time I got arrested for murder?" And he goes, "What?" And then there was a lot of stories that informed Licorice Pizza. But also another thing that started the kernel of the idea for Paul Thomas Anderson was this woman, Alana Haim, who's part of a band that he does music videos for. And he just knew that he wanted to put her in the movie or in a movie. And then the other idea was Paul Thomas Anderson was walking around his neighborhood. I think he just moved to another neighborhood, or he just happened to be walking by. And he saw this younger kid, maybe 14 or whatever, trying to convince this older girl to go out with him. And he was just thinking, it was sort of like similar to the genesis of the idea for Phantom Thread. And he just pictured a younger a boy and an older girl. And he just went, what if the older girl just went out said yes and decided to go out with him? And then those 3 ideas he basically morphed into Licorice Pizza.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. After Anderson wrote producer John Peters into the script, he met with Peters to ask for his blessing.
Yeah, so John Peters was a famous movie producer, and he originally started out as a hairdresser. And he was, I don't know if he was married, but he was dating Barbara Streisand for a time, and he was the producer behind A Star is Born. Not the new one that came out with Bradley Cooper, but the previous one. And so Anderson goes to, and in the script, he wrote him as this crazy maniac, which I guess he may have been. John Peters was on Rogan, and I never met the guy, but it seemed like everything that Rogan talked about, he'd be like, yeah, so when UFC started, it was pretty crazy. And then John Peters goes, yeah, we started that.
Oh,
What do you mean we?
Mhm.
I don't know a lot about this guy. Maybe he did, but he seemed very, vain, I guess. I don't know the right word. I'm sure he's a nice guy. Anyway, so Paul Thomas Anderson goes to his house and goes, look, here's this. He goes, I don't want to read the script. Just tell me what it's about. So he tells him, and then he tells him about the scene where Bradley Cooper goes, if you fuck up my house, I'm going to kill you. Is that your brother? Yeah, I'll fucking choke your brother out in front of you if you fuck up my house.
Yeah.
And while he was describing that scene, he saw the light in John Peters' eyes go out. And he goes, what do you think? And he goes, this girl that he's with, how old is she? He's like in her 20s or whatever. And he goes, what is she, attractive? He goes, yeah, she's beautiful. And he goes, I don't know if I would yell at her. I would try to fuck her. And he goes, actually, that's a better idea. So he said, okay. So then they talked. And then as he was going out the door, John Peters goes, also, you got to do one more favor for me. And he goes, what's that? He goes, you got to get my pickup line in there. And he goes, what's that? He goes, I would go up to a girl and I would just ask, do you like peanut butter sandwiches? And he goes, that would work? And he goes, yeah, it would work. They'd laugh and we start talking. So he puts it in the movie when those two tennis girls walk by when Alana's sitting on the pavement. So...
Yeah,
yes.
that's like iconic. I remember seeing that.
Yeah, don't try it in real life. It doesn't work.
You would know. Anderson saw hundreds of actors auditioning for the role of Gary, but couldn't find an actor that felt right for the part.
You said Gary with such disdain. Hundreds of actors for the role of Gary.
Gary.
So he saw all these directors and he goes, some of them were great, but there was something missing, some real charisma rather than this charisma that they're acting, And he goes, so then I went to Cooper Hoffman, who I had known since he was born, since he was a day old, and I asked him to read the script, and he kind of knew what was going on. Do you know who Cooper Hoffman is?
I guess the kid in the movie?
Yeah.
I don't know him.
He's Philip Seymour Hoffman's son.
Oh my God! I didn't even put that together.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Was he an actor before that?
No. The only time he acted would be in home movies that Paul would make with his kids and I guess Hoffman's kids.
Mm-hmm.
There was a movie they made where Mission Impossible Fallout came out, and they all saw that, and they were like, "This is awesome." So they filmed a fight scene where Cooper falls off a cliff.
Oh, that's so good.
And so Cooper read for it, and Cooper goes, "Are you going to put me in this movie?" And he goes, just read the script. Just don't even worry about it. And then he had Cooper and Alana just read through the script and go through the script together, and had them walk around different parts of town and do some scenes. And then he eventually cast 2 leads in his movie, people who have never acted before.
That's nuts.
It's insane.
Has he done any other roles since then, or
He just recently got a part in a big movie. I have to look it
okay.
up, but I forget.
Mm-hmm. It's funny that he goes, "Are you gonna put me in this? Like, I know I'm gonna be a good, my dad is."
Well, yeah. You know who my dad is, dude? But it is because when you watch the movie, you don't get the sense that neither of them have acted before.
No,
it's very that's obviously something that's impressive to me.
Mm-hmm. But I listened to some things about him talking about them as actors, and it seemed as though they had a lot of time to prepare.
Yeah.
They were together practicing or rehearsing, you would call it. Practicing, rehearsing, doesn't matter, for the movie for a really long time.
And then COVID hit, so the movie was delayed from May 2020. Filming was delayed from May 2020 to August 2020. So that gave them an extra, you do the math, months to rehearse their lines. And he made them recite, because he told them, one of the big things he talked about was, look, you guys are young. Especially Cooper. I think he was like 15 at the time, maybe. And he goes, you're young. So right now, you're going to put off figuring out the scenes and figuring out the script until maybe the night before. that seems like a good idea now, but you are going to be so tired at the end of every day that you will not have time to do it. Please memorize everything now, and then you'll know what to do when the time comes. And he was like, it's just that, like, when's the last time you ate? Are you getting tired? Okay, Cooper wakes up at 11. He's cranky in the morning, so try to get his scenes later in the day. Stuff like that. It was very practical stuff like that. Yeah. Filming the movie, when I hear Anderson talk about it, seems like it was just. I do think it. We'll get into this in a later review, but I do think it's a little bit too not esoteric, but too personal to the point where the point of it may be lost on a mainstream audience or somebody who's outside of that personality or whatever, because it feels like a giant home movie. And the way they filmed it is basically people's kids were in it, and it was during COVID, so they kind of had to scramble a little bit. The budget was inflated a little. But after every day they would go to Anderson's house and project dailies on film, and everybody would watch dailies.
That's cool.
And his kids would just watch, and everybody would hang out. Seems like a cool time.
Yeah. So, Licorice Pizza was released nationwide on Christmas 2021 and received positive reviews from critics and ultimately poor box office, earning $33 million worldwide off a $40 million budget.
Yeah, I like Licorice Pizza, but it really made me yearn for Paul Thomas Anderson to do something more commercial. Not even commercial. Like, I don't want him to do a $200 million movie. I still want him to be Paul Thomas Anderson, but I want him to make something closer to Boogie Nights, There Will Be Blood, and Phantom Thread. I do think movies like Inherent Vice and The Master are interesting, but I like the bonus. I like people operating. We talked about this with Kubrick. I like people operating or directors operating to be able to do very intellectual things with movies and push the genre while also appealing to the mainstream audience. It's a very hard thing to do. And he's done it before. But for me, I think we talked about the movie becoming a little too personal feeling. It came out during an era where nostalgia felt like it was in fashion. Mm-hmm. So, and I think this started with Alfonso Cuarón's Roma in 2018, which was basically inspired by his childhood. Then we had Belfast, which is Kenneth Branagh's childhood movie. Mm-hmm. Then there was The Fabelmans, which was Steven Spielberg's childhood movie. And then Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, you sort of could lump into those. I think you can too, because it still is personal to him. And also in the I mean, this is an interpretation of, this doesn't count for interpretation of the movie, but in the book Inherent Vice, in the book Once Upon a Time in Hollywood that he wrote, there's a scene where his dad and Rick Dalton or somebody talk about Quentin Tarantino. And I think Licorice Pizza also can fall under that category of these personal director nostalgia movies, because obviously in 1973 is when the movie takes place or around there, and Anderson's 3 when that happens, so he didn't live through these events, but the events seem very personal enough to him where it feels nostalgic. And I think that era in movies that I think is hopefully over is, I think it was kind of hit and miss. Like something like Once Upon a Time in Hollywood was a hit. Roma was a hit critically, but mainstream audiences, whatever. Belfast, same thing. Fabelmans, it bombed, sort of the same thing. Other nostalgia things you can say would be like No Way Home, Spider-Man No Way Home, but then you have other things that Marvel's done with nostalgia that just feel really cheap.
Yeah. They've done a lot with nostalgia.
I don't find, I think the problem with Licorice Pizza is like I said earlier, I don't find Alana and Gary that compelling as lead characters. The only thing I really find interesting in Gary and Alana's relationship is the rift in their age difference. So, like, when they first meet, obviously Gary really wants to date Alana, and Alana's sort of apprehensive, but she's, maybe I'll, whatever. She's kind of flirting with him a little bit. And then they go on the plane because Gary has to go to some event for an acting thing, but he needs an adult chaperone, so he asks Alana to go. And they go on the plane, and Gary's very flirtatious. And then Lance shows up, and Lance is somebody who's probably closer to being as old as she is than Gary is to Lance. And she decides to go with Lance. She prefers the prospect of somebody her own age. Gary does the same thing when that girl Sue Pomerantz, who's at Gary's age, shows up, And suddenly, when Gary and Alana were very flirty and stuff, all of a sudden Sue Pomerantz shows up, and Gary's like, "Oh no, Alana's just my babysitter. Shut up! Don't even worry about her. She's dumb." And so that's very interesting, and that spawns a lot of conflict in their relationship. But also, after their big business boom with the waterbeds, and after the scene I just described when Gary hooks up with Sue Pomerantz, they're sitting at a diner. And this also highlights their difference in priorities as a teenager and then an adult. So Alana's reading the actual newspaper, and Gary's reading like the porno version of the newspaper. And then on the TV, Richard Nixon shows up and goes, we're just going to have to not have oil for a while. We're just going to have to cut down and whatever. And Alana goes, Gary, are you hearing this? And he goes, what? No, oh yeah, crazy oil embargo. And she goes, do you know what this means? And he goes, no. And she goes, we're like, we can't sell our water beds anymore. It's an oil embargo. He goes, they're not made of oil. I thought they were made of rubber or something. He goes, that's oil, dipshit. And so it speaks to her. She's at that age where she has that Jesus complex that everybody has, where I'm young and I'm going to save the world. And he's still ignorant and doesn't care. I just want to hustle as a little kid. But then this starts the best sequence of the movie, I think. And part of me wishes it's easy to look at a movie and go, that should have been the whole thing, to point at the best thing and go, make it the whole thing.
Yeah.
But it's the sequence where there's the oil embargo, and we're watching this semi-apocalyptic LA where everybody's off the streets and there's all the cars don't have any gas and nobody's driving around. And the rules, now it's period LA, but the rules are different. We haven't seen anything like this before in a movie. And they go to John Peters' house. John Peters goes, I'm going to choke your brother out in front of you if you mess up my house. And then they do that whole thing of John Peters is super scary. I'll get to that later. John Peters is super scary, and they drop him off at the gas station, and then they go back, they beat up his car, then the truck runs out of gas. Alana has to, without gas, like drive the truck backwards downhill. Super dangerous. She's freaking out. They're all serious. And finally they get out of it alive. They almost died. Mm-hmm. And she's realizing, oh my God, I just died hanging out with a 15-year-old. And Gary's going, woo, Alana, that was awesome. And then that cuts to her sitting on the curb, and she's basically realizing, like, what am I doing? I really have to stop. I think it's the most interesting character beat for her in the movie. Like, what am I doing? I just really have to, let me just do something that matters. And then she sees the poster for Joel Wax. And Joel Wax is an interesting character. I'm gonna ask you what you remember about him. But he was played by Benny Safdie, who's one of the directors of Uncut Gems. And at first, I was thinking, is Benny Safdie just not that good of an actor? Because he seemed very rigid and uncomfortable, and I didn't really buy his performance. And then it gets to the part where Alana gets invited out to dinner with him, and she finds out that he's actually there with his gay lover, and she needs to pretend like she's the gay lover's boyfriend, because that reporter with the number 12 jersey, if you remember that guy, was there looking, because I think he was a reporter. It's kind of sketchy. I don't know who exactly
he's just
he was.
A weird guy, right?
Right, and I think he saw him and goes, yeah, he's trying to out me as a gay guy. So Alana goes and brings the guy home. Also, Joel Wax is a gay guy, and that's where I'm like, oh, that's why he's so uncomfortable and rigid all the time, because he tells the guy, his lover, goes, you know how uncomfortable I am every day? And when he says that line, I realize his body language seems genuine.
Yeah.
Whereas he's finally able to just be a person, you know? And then as soon as he goes back into being Joel Wax, he goes, all right, thank you guys for coming by, like pretending that they're just his friends. And that I thought that was a great performance. Anyway, back to Alana. She brings the lover home and realizes these guys are in love and they can't really be together. What am I doing not being with Gary right now? And then she goes back and falls in love with Gary again, or they reunite. I'm sorry, I'm going on. Gary has an interesting thing about being bullied, where this is the thing I think that's most interesting about his character, where every time he's confronted with somebody bigger than him, he always turns super shy and quiet. But anytime he's facing somebody his age or younger, he is very charismatic and outgoing. So when they're on the plane, and he's flirting with her like, "Damn, this steak's good, huh? Yeah, I'm cool as fuck." And then the stewardess Brenda shows up. She goes, "Are you an actor?" And he's like, "Hey, Brenda, what's going on? You're hot. I'm hot. Let's do this." And he's flirting with her super casually. And then Lance comes over, who's a little older and cooler than him, and he just goes white and doesn't say anything. He's like, "Hey, Gary, what's going on?" He's like, "Hey,
Yeah.
And then on the flight back, Lance kind of invades their personal space, and Gary can't really fight back against him. Then later, when John Peters shows up, when he's yelling at him like, "I'll choke your brother out in front of you," he's like, "Yes, sir. I won't mess up your house." And then he goes, and then they're filling up the waterbed, and he goes, he said he'd strangled Greg or kill him. And then he goes, "Screw this," and he ruins his house. He takes the hose out and gets water everywhere. And then on the drive back, he's going to Alana to impress her. I mean, I wanted to say something. You know what I should have said to him? "I'll kick your ass, dude." He's acting all tough. And then in one of the funniest shots of all time, the truck just stops, and they look, and John Peters is just marching up the road at night, and like his white outfit is just bellowing in the air, and it's so funny. He just walks in and goes, "All right, take me back, just reverse it," like just wordlessly. And then obviously they're like, "Oh shit!" And as soon as he gets in the car, Gary just goes white, and then they spend the entire drive
quiet.
Gary spends the entire drive like this, and John Peters is just flirting with Alana the whole time. They get back to the house, and he says the funniest line in the movie: "There's no gas in the goddamn car, Steve-O." So good. And that sequence reminded me of the Cocaine Energy from Boogie Nights. It's so funny. I don't need that in every Paul Thomas Anderson movie, but it was nice to see it come back. And then obviously they drop him off again, and then Gary goes back to being a tough guy and beats up his windshield, and then they run out of gas. And then later, I think you'll remember this guy. There's during the grand opening of the Pinball Palace, Gary sees an older guy like humping the machine. And he goes, "Hey, you're going to break the machine. Stop humping it." And he goes, "I'm telling you to fuck off, pal." And Gary's just like, And he doesn't have a comeback. And he just goes up to some random little kid and goes, "All right, that's it. You're out of here." The kid's like, "What?" He just kicks him out. And then he yells at some other kids that are pulling up. He goes, "Bike's on the side. You're blocking the entrance. Get out."
Mm-hmm. And
also, that's the guy, if you remember that later, there's a later scene where Gary runs out of the place, and you can see the guy who's humping the machine, and there's a girl in front of him, in between him and the machine. So he's just humping a girl and humping the machine at the same time. But so Gary has a weird thing like that. And I think that's kind of interesting. I don't know if that's like the most interesting thing to talk about the movie. But again, I don't find this movie that interesting compared to Anderson's other movies. Mm-hmm. Do you have any thoughts about this movie that you remembered? We saw this in the theater together.
Yeah. I remember really enjoying it the first time I saw it. Remember one thing that stuck out to me that you pointed out was at the end, the running sequence.
Yes.
Maybe not. Was it the end?
Yep.
What was it about that was so interesting?
Was it when they were coming back together at the end and they cut to their respective moments of when they showed some genuine care for each other?
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That was good.
Yeah, that was good. It just seems like you said, nostalgia driven.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a love letter to that area from Paul Thomas Anderson. Like he's talking or he's pointing out some certain aspects that he liked about where he grew up. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. It's like it's not. I don't mean this badly. It's like a self-indulgent exercise, sort of.
I did think it was interesting. I remember watching it and thinking, Gary is his name, you said? I remember watching it and thinking, Gary is interesting in the way that he's so young and making big money moves that he's making.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, that goes back to the contrast in him and Alana's personalities. Because I mentioned, obviously Alana's older and stuff, but there is an aspect to them where Gary is older for his age and Alana is younger for her age. And let's say she's 25. She keeps claiming she's different ages throughout the movie, but she just wants to hang out with Gary and his 15-year-old friends. And Gary, all he wants to do is just set up businesses and and diversify and set up an Instagram businessman account.
Yeah.
He would be. Oh my God, he'd be following so much of those.
Yeah.
But also, I don't think if Anderson intended to just go out and be like, "Oh, I'm going to make this in the 70s," blah, blah, blah. Because he started writing this going, all right, so I have Gary. He's a very business-oriented kid. All all right, so what can a kid do this day in age? He starts a YouTube channel. He's like, well, that's not very entertaining for a movie. Just a kid doing a YouTube channel. So then he's like, shit, am I going to have to do another period piece? Because he's done like 6 in a row.
2 scenes involving a character doing a stereotypical Asian accent sparked controversy.
Do you remember these 2 scenes?
I don't.
So there's a scene, Gary and his mom do marketing sort of for local businesses, and they're describing the menu, or I guess a summary of the restaurant. And the husband has this Asian wife. They have an Asian restaurant. The husband is white, played by Jerry Michael Higgins, I think is his name. And the wife is Asian. And the mom is reading out the pamphlet, and she goes, also our little porcelain doll waitresses do this, and you see the woman's smile disappear, right? And then John Michael Higgins and the mom talk about the menu, and then I'm not going to do the accent because I would like to keep continuing to do this podcast.
Yeah.
But he does an Asian accent to her, and then she says something back, and then he goes, yeah, we don't like the porcelain doll thing, but then everything else is good. And then the scene happens later where he's with another Asian lady, and then he does the same thing again. He goes, they go, what did she say? And he goes, I don't know, I don't speak Japanese, right? Now, people said that those scenes are racist because it's played for laughs, right? It is, but I think that, especially the first scene, I think the reason it's funny is because the joke is on the guy being racist, not that she's being racismed against, if that's a phrase, right? Mm-hmm. And because what that scene, the very important part of that scene is where we're cued into that woman's reaction to hearing porcelain doll. So now we're from her perspective, because the porcelain doll is like saying the porcelain doll waitress is sort of I guess it's a vaguely racist thing.
Yeah. Right?
And so that cues us into her perspective. So meaning we're not here to laugh at her. We're witnessing her, experience this racism or whatever. The guy who's the villain or the wrongdoer and the guy we're laughing at in the scene, at least from my perspective, is the white guy. Now, there's an Asian guy in my writers group named Takio. He told me he didn't like that. I'm not going to argue. I'm not. It's a subjective thing. I didn't feel that way personally. He did that. Fair enough. He did. Fair enough.
Yeah.
But that's just my opinion on it. People were calling for the movie to not be nominated, but I think there was like an Asian organization, like the Network for Asian Actors, something like that. Which is, I'm not going to sit here and go, this is getting way out of whack, and this is bullshit. But it's a thing that exists in the movie that's obviously going to cause some controversy.
So I guess that finishes the dossier on Paul.
Dan, you ignorant slut.
What?
There's one more movie we need to talk about.
Which is? The
untitled Paul Thomas Anderson movie that is currently in production as of January 27th, 2024.
Damn.
It started shooting 6 days ago. It's described, the budget's $100 million, which is Anderson's biggest budget by a factor of like 2.5, if you don't adjust for inflation. And it was described as his most commercial movie yet.
Ooh.
Remember I said Licorice Pizza gave me a desire to want to see a more commercial. This is interesting. Do you know anything about this?
No.
Leonardo DiCaprio is going to star.
Oh, no, yeah.
Okay, Sean Penn, Regina Hall, and they started filming. There was nobody knows anything about the plot. People were speculating that it could be Vineland, which is another Thomas Pynchon novel, and people are saying maybe because it is contemporary. It's going to be his first contemporary movie since Punch Drunk Love.
Mm.
And people were speculating that it could be Vineland. Vineland takes place in like the Reagan era, 1980s US of A. I don't know why I said US of A like that.
Weird.
But people are speculating that he's going to translate it or transpose it to modern day America. I don't know. I said it's something more commercial. Inherent Vice wasn't very commercial. I've never read Vineland. Maybe it would be more commercial. Mm-hmm. Or maybe it's an entirely original screenplay that he wrote. I don't know. But I saw there was somewhere in Eureka, California, where they're filming where I guess it has a lot of high plains and some mountains in the background. It's very foggy. Somebody took a video recently of them shooting the movie at like a small airport.
Mm.
And there's a black helicopter and what looks like government vehicles.
Mm.
So I don't know what kind of people are speculating that it could be sort of like a political comedy. Jesus Christ. It's 1 o'clock right now. We're dead tired.
Yeah,
And a political comedy about maybe the drug trade in around that area. I don't know, but it's very interesting. That's all the details we know for now.
Or what if it's about UFO documents?
Ooh, deep cut for people who know what that is a reference to. How about this? I want to know more about this movie, and I'm sure you do. So people from the future who know the details about this movie, can you please comment and tell us what is going on and what the plot is and what the title is going to be, and also if it's good or if you've seen it or not, and how many Oscars it won, and also send us a copy.
Yes.
Yeah, was this a good one? Let us know. Who would you like to see us do next? Not sexually.
You can't say, you just say that.
What do you mean? I have to clarify.
I think they know.
All right. Thanks for watching. Really, if you're here, holy shit! Thanks for watching.
Here we go.
We know there's some of you out there apparently watching, which we really, really appreciate it. Thank you to everybody who watched the Stanley Kubrick episode, and we will see you in the next one, which is we don't know yet. Stay tuned. Bye. Thank you.
Cheers.
Cheers.